Ladies and gentlemen, the hour being 7:15 with 235 people plus in the auditorium, I'd like to call the special town meeting of the town of Abington to order on this date of May 21st, 2018. Without hearing any objection, I'll waive the reading of the warrant and the constable's return, but for the record, the Abington Selectmen have called this town meeting and issued their warrants. The warrants have been posted. Notices were delivered per the town bylaws for the special town meeting to begin at 7 o'clock or thereafter, and the annual town meeting to begin at or after 7:30 p.m. We'd like to start tonight in our beautiful new auditorium. We welcome you here to Abington Middle High School. Hopefully you're much more comfortable than the old Frollo School and the seats in the Abington High School gymnasium. It is my pleasure to invite and to honor tonight two of the members of the class of 2018 who will be the first class to graduate from this new Abington High School. They will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the president of the class, Laurel Blanchard, and the secretary, Alana Burgess. Would you all please rise?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies, and congratulations. This time I'd like to introduce and invite the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Ken Coyle, to the podium. We'll make a dedication and presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This year's annual town report is dedicated to Richard L. Dicktower. Richard joined the Abington Police Department as a permanent intermittent patrolman in 1961. In 1963, he was appointed as a permanent patrolman and worked his way through the ranks to detective sergeant. And in January 1989, was appointed chief. He served 32 years on the department, retiring in January 1993. The town report is also in memoriam of Abington residents, Robert Rob Cunningham, Richard L. Tower, Albert Reichert, Mary E. McCarthy, Edwin Arthur Putkinen, Mary Drusilla Cox, Barbara Reeves, John K. Jacob, Douglas W. Godfrey, Joanne Cullen, Francis N. Pirtle, Mary Joan Sullivan, Thomas Laporto, Sylvia J. Collins, John J. Walensky, Jr. We would also ask that you keep in your minds and hearts the community of Stoughton, especially the families and friends of the young men from Stoughton High School who sadly lost their lives this past Saturday in a tragic car accident. Christopher DeSer, Eric Sabla, Nick Joyce, David Bell. Please join me in a moment of silence in memory of these young men and deceased Abington Town employees and volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Coyle. Welcome to this special town meeting of May 21st, 2018. My name is Sean Riley, and I am the town moderator. It is my responsibility to preside over and regulate the discussion of tonight's articles which appear in the special town meeting warrant and later the annual town meeting warrant, the documents which are made available to all residents prior to tonight's meeting. The warrants are prepared and approved by the Board of Selectmen, and as you entered tonight's meeting, you should have picked up a copy of the warrant, a tan list of motions, a green 4-page spreadsheet for the budget, a list of surplus real estate, some information about marijuana, and signs. It's there for you if you would like it, or you can share with the person next to you. We'll be using and referring to those documents throughout tonight's meeting. We're excited to be hosting the first ever town meeting in this wonderful auditorium. We'll use some of the available technology that is built into this theater, and we will try to display each article as we address them. However, please note that the printed warrant is the official warrant, and we will address those articles. So if there are any discrepancies between the content in your warrant and that which appears on the screen, we'll be voting on the language in the warrant unless otherwise noted. I've been asked to inform you that in case of a need to evacuate the auditorium, there are exit doors available on both the left and right, in the far back, in the sides, and right here at each side of the stage. The New England Town Meeting has been described by some as the purest form of democracy in America, and we greatly appreciate those of you who are in attendance tonight to take care of the town's business. Tonight we'll do our best to move the meeting along. while also providing reasonable time for open debate and to answer your questions. I know that some of you are here for particular issues or several issues. We hope that you will spend your time with us for all of the issues, as we do have business that must be taken and addressed by the town tonight. If we do not finish tonight, we must return here tomorrow night to finish the business, so we'll do our best to finish everything as quickly as possible tonight. We have a very brief special town meeting tonight, which will be then followed by the annual town meeting. The special town meeting warrant only contains 7 articles. That will be short. The annual town meeting contains 31 articles, including the proposed operating budget for the town of Abington for all services, which will become effective as of July 1st, 2018, upon your vote of approval tonight. Please allow me to introduce our town clerk, Leanne Adams, and our town council, Greg Corbo of Copeland and Page. Mrs. Adams will be serving as the clerk of this town meeting, will be recording the wording of any motions and the results of any votes taken by you, the residents. Attorney Corbo will be available to answer any legal questions which may arise, and together with the town clerk, they'll try to help me, the moderator, make sure that we run this town meeting in accordance with proper procedure and as smoothly as possible. Seated to my left are also the town manager, Rick LaFond, and the finance committee for the town of Abington. The Finance Committee is comprised of residents of Abington who volunteer their time to review and analyze each article which is to be voted on at each town meeting. At the start of the annual town meeting, I'll ask the chairperson of the Finance Committee to introduce each member of that committee, and he and the town manager will also be invited to make some introductory comments to summarize the budget issues to be presented to you this evening. Rules of the town meeting. We ask that you abide by the following rules and guidelines during our town meeting in order to allow the opportunity to ask questions, share opinions, or simply to listen to the debate. Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or come down to one of the 2 microphones at the bottom of the aisles. Please use the microphone and give your name and address before you begin speaking so that the town clerk can properly record the minutes of the meeting. Please make sure to keep all comments and questions relevant to the subject matter of the article being discussed, and do not make any personal attacks or bring personalities into the debating of an issue. If the moderator believes that the speaker is straying from the issues, I'll have to direct the speaker to limit his or her portion of the debate to that issue. We also ask that the speakers all limit their time at the microphone so that others will have an opportunity to speak and be heard. A motion to move the question will be taken up like any other motion from the floor. For those of you who are new to town meeting, a motion to move the question is a request to end the debate and move directly to a vote on the article. But to move the question, a person must be recognized by the moderator. The motion to move the question must then be immediately mentioned. You cannot take the microphone, recite your opinion of the article, and then try to shut off others' debates by moving the question at the end of your comments. Please also understand that the moderator has a right to rule that a motion to move the question may be out of order if I believe that the motion is unfairly or prematurely limiting the voters' rights to hear answers to questions or to better understand an article or amendment. Only registered voters of Abington may vote here at a town meeting. Any non-resident or non-registered voter is required to sit in the upper left section, as I'm looking at you. Those who are in the middle section up top are all voters. If you are not a registered voter, you must shift over to the left. If you are a voter and you want to be counted, you should be sitting either in the middle of the upper level or down here at the lower level. Department heads and members of the press are allowed to sit here in the front row in front of me, the front rows. Any person who is not a resident of Abington and wishes to address the meeting must first be recognized by the moderator and have approval of the majority vote of the members of the town meeting. However, in accordance with the town charter, non-resident department heads and superintendents who work for our town are allowed to speak or answer questions if requested. They may also sit and consult with their relevant committee or board. Town meeting, again, will strive to adjourn tonight at a reasonable hour, and if for any reason we do not finish our review and voting on all the articles, we'll have to continue this meeting tomorrow night, which I hope we will not have to do. We'll do our best to finish our work this evening. If we have to stand and be counted, I have appointed 3 people to help, actually 4 people to help count. Mr. Joseph Shea, Mr. Larry Keogh, Mr. Robert Wing, and Mr. Richard Smith will all be responsible for the sections that they are seating at, and Mr. Wing will also be responsible to count any votes from the Finance Committee or from the town clerk or myself. I usually abstain with every vote. It also is my duty to appoint a deputy moderator for the coming year, and therefore I must ask your first vote tonight to be approved former moderator Jack Buckley as a deputy moderator tonight. So all those in favor of appointing Jack Buckley as a deputy moderator, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Unanimous, Jack. Congratulations. Understanding that many of you may have babysitters at home, we ask that you turn down your cell phone ringers to down or off, and please take any telephone communications out to the lobby so as not to disturb those seated around you. Again, to understand that in order to debate or discuss an item at today's meeting, the subject matter must be in the warrant in the form of an article. The Finance Committee and others will be presenting their motions to either approve an article as it's printed, or to propose amended wording with updated information, or to oppose an article, which we call passing over an article. If you have any questions about procedure or how to do something, please feel free to ask me. We'll do our best to make sure that we all understand what we're voting on before we actually take and declare your votes. Unless there's any general questions, we'll get started with the special town meeting warrant articles, which are on the first page of your handouts and may magically appear on the screen in just a second. Article 1 will see the town will raise and appropriate the sum of money to pay the unpaid bills for prior years or take any other action thereto, the bill being $5,220.44 to be transferred from the FY 2000 unemployment line item and pay a prior year's unemployment bill. Mr. Sala. The chairman of the Finance Committee, Matt Sala, will typically make most of the motions this evening.
See if that's high enough. Okay. For Article 1, the Finance Committee moves to approve Article 1 as printed in the warrant.
Finance Committee makes a motion to approve Article 1. This requires, because it's an unpaid bill, a 9/10 vote. So if it's not a unanimous approval, I will have to ask you to stand and be counted one by one. All those in favor of approving Article 1 as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Thank you. Article 2 is to vote to transfer $60,000 from available funds for the town's detail work account. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to transfer $60,000 from fiscal year 2018 Police Department salary account to the town's detail work account as described in Article 2 of the warrant.
Finance Committee makes a motion to approve Article 2. Anything to be heard on the motion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 3 is the vote to transfer available funds to fund the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the police union. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to fund and implement the cost items of the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the International Brotherhood of Police Officers Local 393, covering the period of July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2018. The necessary funds having been previously approved in Article 1 of the May 22nd, 2017 annual town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Sala. Anything to be heard on the motion? Yes, sir, if you want to approach the microphone. Mike DeMarco from Karen Lane. I have to repeat this because it is being taped on camera, so we would appreciate people come down and use the microphones. What was the agreement? You want to summarize that? Town manager, moderator recognizes town manager Rick LaFawn. Sorry, Rick.
Sure. The core elements of the agreement is it's a 4-year agreement. The contract is in arrears by approximately 4 years. It raises the top step salary for the officers by approximately 12%, the entry-level salary by about 16%, and in conjunction with the article before it, it also sets up an account, a pass-through account for detail rates so that officers don't have to wait for private contractors to pay them. Sometimes it takes many, many weeks or even months for private contractors to pay details. And it also fundamentally, it raises the detail rate to about $52 per hour for private details. Those are the essential core elements of the agreement. And again, they're in 4 years in arrears. So those are the core elements of the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. LaFawn. Well, the question was, what was the percentage rate?
Again, on average, over the course of 4 years, it raises the top step by about 12% over the course of 4 years. So that's, you can do the math, proration about over 4 years, it's 12%.
Thank you, Mr. LaFawn. Any other questions? If not, on the Finance Committee's motion to approve, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 4, to see if the town will transfer the sum of $88,496 from certified free cash to cover our snow and ice deficit. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to approve Article 4 as printed in the warrant.
Motion to approve. Is anything to be heard on the matter? If not, all those in favor of approving Article 4, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 5, to see the town will transfer from available funds the sum of $4,500 to cover the costs estimated for an Abington Fire Department to provide fire and emergency medical details for the town fireworks display. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to pass over Article 5.
Want to explain why before that?
Yes. So the reason that we have moved to pass over this article, when it was submitted, the fire chief was not sure if they would have the money to cover the detail in their budget for this current year. It does appear that they do, and if they do not, they will come to the Finance Committee for a reserve fund transfer, and the Finance Committee's reserve fund has the funds to cover that by the end of the year.
So a little public service announcement. June 10th is the 306th birthday of the town of Abington, and the Abington Celebrates Committee has put together a nice celebration for that weekend of June 8th, 9th, and 10th, featuring fireworks, weather permitting, on June 9th. If it's a bad night, they'll move it to the 10th. There's pamphlets in the corridor, and there's also a Facebook page. I hope you'll be there to support them and help to keep that new tradition to stay alive for the years to come. All those in favor of passing over Article 5 as proposed by the Finance Committee, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. It's unanimous. Article 6, see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from certified free cash to the stabilization fund, which is our rainy day savings account. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to pass over Article 6.
Finance Committee makes a motion to pass over Article 6. Anything to be heard on the matter? Yes. Mrs. Whiting. Yeah, if you could. See, you set a bad precedent over there.
Okay. Cindy Whiting, 100 Colonel Hunt Drive. Could you just explain why we're passing over putting money in certified free cash?
Into the stabilization fund.
Stabilization,
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm reading certified. And also, I think probably answer the second one. And I know the
Yes.
answer, and I know most people do, but I just, if you could explain it.
Yep, absolutely. So for this article and the next article, Article 7, which is for other post-employment benefits, which are two articles that we normally put a percentage of free cash into each year to put away for, essentially, for a rainy day. The Finance Committee was, we always prefer to put money into the stabilization and other post-employment benefits funds. For this particular year, we chose to use the money that we would normally put into that as seed money for the full-day kindergarten. So taking the money that we would normally put into the savings fund, use that for the first year of the full-day kindergarten program, which in subsequent years should be mostly covered by state reimbursement.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
On the money going in there, I know I heard at some meeting that we were going to take a leap of faith that the state was going to reimburse us that money. So if we don't
Cindy,
get that...
Cindy, can you
Oh.
see if that microphone's on? We had turned it on earlier. Oh, there it is. If you just turn it down a little, pull it down. There you go.
So watching some of the meetings, I happened to see or hear that we were kind of taking a leap of faith that we were going to get that money back from the state. So I guess I'm just curious if this is a smart thing to do. I know that there was probably a lot of back and forth over it, so a little more explanation as to whether we are or how it's going to come to us.
There was, in fact, a
Thank you.
lot of debate within the Finance Committee for any of those who watched our meetings or came to them, and I know several of you did come. Thank you. There was a lot of debate over this. One of the questions that we had as a committee was whether or not what the probability or likelihood of the increase in state funds for future years was. In talking with the school department, Superintendent Schaefer, Assistant Superintendent Moschella, the state's formula is based off of number of students in the system, and we are very close to a threshold at which we would receive more reimbursement from the state on that. And the number of students that would be included in our totals based on the full-day kindergarten program would, at least at the current state thresholds, put us above the threshold.
Thank you, Mr. Sala. Moderator recognizes Katie.
Kate Platty, 45 Baxter Ave. I'm just wondering what is in the stabilization fund? There's no balance on the warrant, so I was wondering if you could share with us what's in there.
It's between $1.4 and $1.5 million.
And I know that that reserve also affects our bond rating. Do we need to go up to raise the bond rating? I know with all the borrowing that we've done with the school and with the fire truck, that kind of affects it. Do we need to put more money in the stabilization fund to kind of keep that healthy?
Moderator recognizes the town manager, Rick LaFond.
There's many factors that impact the bond rating. It's not simply a stabilization account. It's, in fact, our bond rating was increased approximately 2 years ago. Stabilization account was what it is now about at that time. When it was increased about 2 years ago, one of the notes on that was the town's conservative budgeting practices, which includes not just our rainy day fund, but the fact that we continually use conservative budget estimates, the fact that we generate always very a generous free cash because we tend to spend less than we budget. We generate our revenue estimates are very conservative. So it's stabilization and savings is only one piece of a very, a broad formula that goes into determining a bond rating. So, it's more complex than simply a savings account. Certainly, it's nice to have more in savings, but to try to look at one specific factor and say, your bond rating is based upon X or Y. Just there's a lot that goes into it, and I know treasurer collector would probably say it's impossible to if you talk to Moody's or Standard & Poor's, to get a straight answer out of them in terms of whether or not one factor itself would determine a bond rating.
Thank you, Mr. LaFawn.
I have one more question. Do you mind, Mr. Riley?
Go right ahead.
No, forget it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderator recognizes Mrs. Whiting.
Cindy Whiting, 100 Colonel Hunt Drive. I just had one more question. I know last year when I was sitting on Finance Committee,
Just pull that right out. There you go.
so last year when I was sitting on Finance Committee, we had taken some free cash and we put it to the schools, I think for books under the Capitol. And I think we were told at that time it was like a one-time only that we would take some free cash and try to put it into a budget type situation. And now we're doing it again for $450,000 more. So it seems like every time we have a little free cash, we're putting it. So a one-time only thing has now become a two-time only thing. And I'm just wondering if this is going to be a every year only thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiting. Anything else to be heard on the matter? Mr. Shea? Joseph Shea, 3 Wyman Road. Save a little time.
Thank you. I might forget it. I have a concern. I think the full-day kindergarten attempt to fund it for this year is a good idea. However, my question is, what happens next year if the state formula does not give us additional funds? Number one, I've heard the state is looking at revising the formula, and God knows what that could end up with. And number two, I hate to say it, but we've been in a recovery from the 2008 crash now for 10 years. The question is, what happens when that ends?
So we are talking about stabilization, but it is directly related to the funding of kindergarten and the reimbursement. So is there someone from the school department, where are you seated, who might want to explain generally? We'll get to this in more detail when we get to the budget. So the question is, as I understand, the $450,000 is being put up by the town to put up the money, the seed money for kindergarten, and then the state has some sort of procedure where they refund moving forward part or all of that. If you could explain more about that, it would be great. Please identify yourself, sir.
Sure. Chris Coyle, Karen Lane, Chairman, School Committee. So essentially, you're correct. It's to seed it for an initial year. The formula is calculated. We work with the people at the state to give us this information. Every information that we have, everything we have, supports that we will receive the additional $450,000 in Chapter 70 going forward. Everything is made with the best information we possibly have available at this time. I don't know how to better answer it than that.
Thank you.
What would be the plans?
Mr. Shea.
What will be the plans? Are there any discussion yet on what would happen next year if it does not happen?
We would have to find the money in our budget to continue the funding of the full-day kindergarten. It will be part of our budget going forward. We would make changes elsewhere.
So you would fund it, you wouldn't be coming back and looking for $450,000?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Anything else to be heard on Article 6? If not, oh, yes, ma'am, in the rear. I will, yes, we'll have to ask if you could all try to move the mic to your abilities, put it right in front of your mouth, Move it high, move it low, whatever you can do. Please talk into the microphone. We have a great sound system, but we have to utilize it properly. Thank you. Anything else to be heard on the article? Motion is to pass over. All those in favor of passing over the article, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. We move on to Article 7. Article 7, see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from certified free cash to the OPED Trust Fund, or the Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to pass over Article 7.
Finance Committee moves to pass over Article 7 for similar reasons to the previous article. Anything to be heard on this article or this motion? If not, all those in favor of approving the Finance Committee's motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Thank you. That concludes the 7 articles of special town meeting. I declare that the special town meeting of May 21st, 2018 to hereby be adjourned. And at this time, I call to order the annual town meeting of the town of Abington for May 21st, 2018. If you turn the page to the warrant of the annual. I would also want to pause for a second. I might have omitted, it might have been on the screen. The Memorial Day observances will be held a week from today on May 28th. There are observances starting at 7:30 in the morning, and the parade will be at 10 o'clock in the morning, leaving from Beaverbrook, going down Washington Street, taking a right on Adams and a right onto Pearl and into the Mount Vernon Cemetery for the traditional annual services. We encourage you to be there to support our veterans for any part of the services in the morning or for the parade itself at 10 o'clock. We move to Article 1 of the annual town meeting. Article 1 is essentially the approval of the town operating budget, and we have the green handout, which we will go through. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce again Matt Sala, the Chairman of the Finance Committee. If you could introduce your committee and have any summary statements you'd like to make, go right ahead, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, and I would like to thank the members of the Finance Committee who have been spending hours and hours over the last several months really throughout this particular committee has been together throughout the entirety of this fiscal year, working towards this budget. On the committee, we have Barbara Ray, our Vice Chairman, Michael Platty, Dr. Patrick Sean Tyler, Lisa Bazanson, Renee Brown, Peter Walters, Greg Belazarian, Katie Comas, who's walking down the aisle right now, and our recording secretary, Deb Libby.
Thank you for your services, Finance Committee. We appreciate all your work. Mr. Sala.
Over the year, we have had meetings with the town manager, the members of the town financial team within the departments, and then each of the heads of the departments of the town government. We have spent hours going over line by line the items of the budget, trying to find the right way to be good stewards of your tax dollars and our tax dollars. The budget that we are presenting this year is over the last several years, if you've been here to town meeting, you've heard us say level service budget. This one is very close to a level service budget, but we have a few things that we have been able to add to it through growth in the town. So the main highlights that we have in the budget are obviously the full day kindergarten that we have already begun discussing. One of the other things that we are very glad to see is the school resource officers. We have 2 school resource officers from the police department who work here in the school system. They were previously on a grant, and we were able to budget them to stay in the department and work in the department full-time. In the second half of the year, the police department will be adding 2 additional positions, and that will allow them to add detectives back to the force for the first time in a very long time, which is something we've been working towards for several years. There will be no increases in water or sewer rates, which was something we were very, very pleased with those departments to be able to do. There are several areas where there were small increases to educational assistance. Various different departments have educational assistants, and we were able to bump up the numbers for those. The benefit that the town receives from its staff, be they police officers, firefighters, or the town clerk's office, any other area, the benefit that we receive from them going for further education definitely outweighs the small amount that we pay towards that. So,
Thank you, Mr. Sala. Mr. LaFawn, do you have anything you'd like to add? No. You don't have to. Great. Thank you very much. All right. We're going to, we'll be voting on the budget, and we'll be referring to the green handout, 4-page budget. What I'd like to do is that we do traditionally every year. We'd start now on the page that has the title across the top, Attachment A, the first line item being town meeting salaries, and going down to the total, which is general government. That's page 1. What I'd like to do is ask, are there any questions on page 1? If so, you can ask or make any amendments. If not, we'll turn to page 2, do the same, turn to page 3, page 4, and then we will vote the budget in total. If there are any amendments, we will vote it as amended. Okay, so are there any questions or anyone has in any of the line items on page 1 from town meeting salaries down to the total, which reads as general government? If not, this is a balanced budget. Once again, congratulations. Please turn to page 2, which on the top is police salaries. On the bottom, you see the total highway and public works. So it encompasses public safety, education, and highway and public works on page 2. Are there any questions in any of those categories? Are you standing to make a question there, Rich? All right. It's a brand new auditorium. We're trying to see what works best about where to put the microphones, how to make this work. So we are going to try to learn from tonight, make it better every year, but I hope you'll bear with us and make this work as well as possible. Moderator recognizes Mr. Richard Testa.
Good evening. Richard Testa, 121 Presidential Drive. I have a question regarding the police salaries budget and the addition of the school resource officers.
yes.
The 2 school resource officers that are going to be replaced, are they dedicated school resource officers, or are they hired as members of the police force and can be utilized as the chief see appropriate?
The chief can correct me if I'm wrong, but this police department will have 2 dedicated school resource officers.
Is that correct, Chief?
Moderator recognizes the Chief of Police, Mr. David Majensky.
That would be correct in theory, but just realize that in the event that I have some catastrophic issue, I still have, as police chief, the right to assign people as needed. But as I stand here today, and as I'm sure I will stand here next town meeting, I think that won't be an issue, but I don't have a crystal ball, so.
Okay. Nope. Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Testa. Any other questions on page 2 from police salaries down through highway and public works? Mrs. Franny, grab that microphone. Great.
How's that?
Great. Name and address, please.
Mary Jo Fernie, 12 Platt Street. I just have a question on the Council of Aging expenses. How much of an increase are they having? I'm looking at roughly 10,000. Is that correct?
Where are you, Mary Jo?
Can I ask how many?
Are you on page 3?
Am I on 3? That's town government.
You're on page 3. You're ahead of us.
Oh, okay, I'll go back. I'll be up.
Just step aside for 1 second. Anybody else want a question on page 2? If not, we'll move to page 3, Mary Jo, so don't go far. Any other questions on page 2? Great. We'll go to page 3. Page 3, which goes from Board of Health salaries down through, it says total miscellaneous on the bottom. Mrs. Franny.
Okay, Council of Aging. I have a question. I'm just curious because of the hours of, they're only open Monday through Thursday, and they're closed on Fridays. And I'm looking at an increase of roughly $10,000. I'm just curious, is that contracts, is that raises, or whatever?
Mr. LaFond.
Yes. As you can see, Mr. Sal is quite a bit taller than me here, so I feel like you, Mary Jo, right now. So 2 issues. One is the fact that the director's salary is being raised primarily because her salary on an hourly basis was less than actually some of the staff. And in addition to that, some of those, the salaries had to be brought up because they were actually trending less than the minimum wage. So those are the two primary reasons.
Any other questions on page 3? Yes, sir. Throughout the night, if someone's approached the microphone and you have a question, feel free to stand in line at the next microphone. We have the 2 mics, so we can try to keep the meeting moving if you'd like.
Robert Pratt, 239 Walnut Street. Because I was involved in this, under veteran salaries, veterans expenses, because Whitman and Abington are joined, is this just what Abington is paying, or is this between Abington and Whitman? And it doesn't say anything about how many employees are in the Veteran Service Office now. So is it for both employees, or is it just for one, or is it for both towns?
That is the Abington portion. There is currently a director of the department and an assistant.
Yes.
So there are 2 employees.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anything else to be heard or any questions on page 3? If not, please turn to page 4. Page 4 is really for informational purposes about some of our what they call enterprise funds, special revenue funds. Any questions on page 4? If not, we'll take a vote to approve the entire budget as been presented to you by the Finance Committee, which is also supported by the Town Manager and the Board of Selectmen, I believe, is the balanced budget. Any questions before we take a vote to approve the budget? If not, all those in favor of approving Article 1, the town operating budget, as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 2 is see if the town will vote to raise appropriate transfer of available funds, $2,111 for the town clerk's salary line item. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,111 to increase the town clerk's salary budget line item for fiscal year 2019 to approve the request to increase the salary of the town clerk by 3%. As the only paid elected official in the town clerk has to come to town meeting to request raises.
I was just questioning myself. Did we actually make a motion to approve the budget for Article 1? You did, okay.
Yes.
Jack Buckley would have yelled at me if he didn't. Okay, great.
We might not have.
Just to be safe, Mr. Sala, make a motion.
The Finance Committee moves to approve Article 1 as stated in the handout entitled Complete Motion under Article 1.
So the pink handout under Article 1, we're not going to read it out loud. It is being inserted into the record. It identifies all the funding sources that fund our entire operating budget. So I'm going to ask for a vote again on Article 1 just to make sure we can pay for our operating budget next year. All those in favor of approving Article 1 as moved by the Finance Committee and according to the handout, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Thank you. Again, going back to Article 2, the motion is to approve the $2,111 increase to the town's clerk's salary. As Matt mentioned, she's an elected official, and elected officials who get paid have to have their salaries approved by town meeting. Finance Committee, the moderator, Selectmen, Planning Board, School Committee are all volunteers, and others. Anything to be heard on this article? If not, all those in favor of approving Article 2, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 3 is the capital plan. Matt?
The Finance Committee moves to appropriate the amounts stated and to approve Article 3 as printed in the warrant.
Finance Committee makes a motion to approve Article 3. It is the charter in the warrant that lists every year what vehicles, equipment, things to be purchased. Is there anything to be heard on Article 3? Yes, sir.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. I have a question for the water superintendent if he's here. If any of the money that's going through the water department enterprise funds is going to address the fact that we're running out of water, that we're nearing our limits, and that we need to figure out some solution to expand the supply.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Moderator, we recognize Water Superintendent Mr. Dan Callahan from the Joint Waterworks.
Yeah, one of the articles we have is the $125,000 with a like amount from the town of Rockland, and that is to develop upgrade the Myers Ave water treatment plant. Right now, we're getting approximately 250,000 gallons a day out of there. We are approved for 420,000. So that is one of the avenues we are taking with the changes to upgrade Myers Ave.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Anything else to be heard on Article 3? If not, all those in favor of approving Article 3 as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 4, annual approval of revolving funds. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to approve Article 4 as printed in the warrant.
Finance Committee makes a motion to approve Article 4 as printed in the warrant. Is there any questions about Article 4? These are funds that would have to be reapproved each year. It takes in money and uses the money for associated expenses. Nothing to be heard. All those in favor of Article 4, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 5, the approval of the firefighters and library contracts. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to approve and implement the cost items for the first year of the collective bargaining agreement with the Abington Firefighters Local 2080 by raising and appropriating the sum of $65,000, and further to approve and implement the cost items for the first year collective bargaining agreement with the Abington Library Staff Association Local 4928 by raising and appropriating the sum of $10,000.
Anything to be heard in the Finance Committee's motion? If not, all those in favor of approving Article 5 as presented, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 6, to approve the annual out-of-district school transportation.
The Finance Committee
Yes.
read it?
What's that?
Do we have to read it?
Yes. Well, what? You just have to read your motion to approve Article 6 as printed and to
Okay.
transfer.
Do we have to read the article?
No, we do not have to read the article.
Excellent.
You just have to read your motion.
Okay,
You're
the
doing a great
Finance
job.
Committee moves to approve Article 6 as printed in the warrant and to transfer $14,000 from free cash to meet this expenditure.
Thank you, Mr. Saller. Anything to be heard on this Article 6? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. It is unanimous. Article 7, the Community Preservation Act approval.
The Finance Committee moves to approve the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee as printed in the warrant and to approve the sum of $582,357.37 with $320,927.46 from fiscal year 29 estimated annual revenues, $9,866.50 from the amounts appropriated under Article 6 of the May 22nd, 2017 annual town meeting for Griffin's Dairy Committee, Griffin Farm Park, and $251,563.41 from the CPA fund balance certified revenue from fiscal year 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Sala. For those of you new, you can see that the Finance Committee Chairman has to identify the funding sources for each of these articles. Thank you for doing that. Moderator will recognize the Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, Mr. Paul Malika, for a brief review.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just as a little heads up, under the CPA budget, we have to approve 5% for administration, 10% for housing, 10% for open space and recreation, 10% for historic, and we're putting 65% in the flexible account. Just to give you an idea, what we approved last year, we approved money for playgrounds, Arnold Field and Laidlaw, the equipment, fencing, Griffin's Dairy for $75,000, the American Legion Hall for $22,000, and engineering study for the Island Grove Bridge to see if what the expense might be. And all those have worked out exceptionally well. And with this year's funding, I think the projects should do as well. What I'd like to say is give special thanks to Dory Jameson, Rick LaFond, Sue Mokum, for their support, Kelly Johnson, our administrative assistant, John Stone, the DPW manager, who, for the projects that he does, we're funding the cost of the equipment, and DPW is actually installing it. So the value of that's probably twice what we're budgeting. And Justin from Cable, and special thanks to Jack Buckley, who, after his third try, got the CPA thing approved. So this is a great program. A lot of stuff gets done throughout the town that otherwise never would. So I think this is a great program for different projects, and the projects that we have scheduled for hopefully for approval tonight are some extremely worthwhile projects that do a lot of good things for the town and otherwise wouldn't get done. So with that, I'll end. And,
thank you, Mr. Malika.
Take any questions.
And thank you to your committee, the work of your committee. So the motion is to approve it as laid out by the motion by Matt Sal, the Finance Committee Chairman, and the items that are being funded are listed in your warrant. Anything else to be heard? Otherwise, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving Article 7 as moved by the Finance Committee, please signify by... I'm sorry, is there a question? Sir.
Rich Negrelli, 340 Diane Circle. Well, what is pickleball? Hey, gotta ask the question, right?
No, it's a great question, and if you'll know why. Does anybody out here know anyone who plays pickleball?
The Pickleball Association built 3 courts down behind the senior center at a cost of like $40,000, which they raised through donation or in-kind contributions. It's been an extremely successful program. The average age is like 50 to like 90, the age span anyways. And it's a great way for people to get exercise, especially as you get older. It's an extremely successful program. What the lights will do will be light the courts, so we can, the Pickleball Association can accommodate more people. So it's the sport. As you get older, you might want to go down and take a look.
The sport itself is a racket sport. It's a little bit like tennis, a little bit like badminton, some other racket sports mixed in together.
Mr. Negrelli, if you need any details, I know just the woman who can speak to you. No, it was a great question, and I'm sure they love the publicity. All right, so all those in favor of approving the community preservation article as presented by the Finance Committee motion, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 8 is to borrow money to purchase a new fire engine for the town of Abington. This is a borrowing article, so so Matt has to read a kind of specific language under the legalities of the law, so I'll give the floor to Matt to read the motion, please.
This will be a long one, sorry. The Finance Committee moves that the sum of $600,000 be and hereby is appropriated to purchase and equip a new rescue pump engine needed to replace the 1982 Maxim fire engine currently on loan from the town of Bridgewater, and for the payment of any and all other costs incidental and relative thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with approval of the Board of Selectmen, is hereby authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 7(1) of the general laws, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore, and that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of insurance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Thank you, Mr. Sala. So it basically is authorizing the town treasurer and the Board of Selectmen to borrow money to purchase this fire engine. And just to save a couple questions, this does not require a debt exclusion or an override for this. This is to be funded from the operating budget in the years to come. Anything to be heard? Any questions on Article 8? If not, this does require a 2/3 vote to approve an article for borrowing. All those in favor of approving Article 8 as presented by the Finance Committee Chairman, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 9, the payment of $5,000 to the Health Imperative Violence Prevention Group. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to approve Article 9 as printed in the warrant and to transfer $5,000 from free cash to meet this expenditure.
This is an annual article. It used to be called Dove. The group was called Dove, and then they had a new day was another name, and now it's the Health Imperative. Any questions on Article 9? There being none, all those in favor of approving Article 9 as moved, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 10, to authorize the selectmen to sell surplus property. Article 10.
The Finance Committee moves to authorize the Board of Selectmen to dispose of and convey properties set forth in the attachment entitled Surplus Property, which properties were previously transferred to the Board of Selectmen and declared surplus pursuant to the vote taken under Article 7 at the May 22, 2017 annual town meeting.
Finance Committee makes a motion to approve Article 10 as presented. Are there any questions? Mr. Negrelli, there is a handout if you want to review it or take it home Mr. Negrelli.
Negrelli, 340 Diane Circle. I just want to know, is it just this one property on Diane? Because it hasn't been checked for any, toxic chemicals or hazmat, because the owner of that area, it was taken away from the town. I mean, the town took it away from him. He dumped everything back there. So my question is, has this piece of property been checked out before you sell it? Because on Diane Circle, because again, there's asphalt and all sorts of chemicals, and there could be possibly trucks buried back there, possibly tractors. Again, this property was taken away from a construction company many years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Negrelli. Does anyone have an answer to that question?
No, the town's obligation is disclosure when something is sold. These properties were investigated as not necessary for any town use. Last year, the town put these out for the public to review, and they were declared surplus. So as long as the town is in full disclosure of what the town is aware of, and again, I hate to say it, but buyer beware is what it comes down to.
As I understand it, this article allows the selectmen to move forward with selling it at a time and in a manner pursuant to the law when you guys decide, the board decides to do so?
Right, that's correct. And again, what the method is of whether it's a public auction or RFP, has been discussed in the past, but there's no conclusion on that as to what method of disposition just yet. That's for
the Board of Selectmen to
discussion.
decide.
Correct.
Right. Anything else to be heard on this article? If not, this is a majority vote also. All those in favor of Article 10 as proposed by the Finance Committee, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. It's unanimous. Article 11, $75,000 to retain a zoning consultant. Mr. Sala?
The Finance Committee moves to pass over Article 11.
Finance Committee makes a motion to pass over Article 11. Mr. Franey? Do you want to explain why, Matt?
Sure. With the updating of the town's master plan, which is coming up in Article 13, the Finance Committee, in discussion with representatives from the Planning Board, felt it prudent to update the master plan before bringing in someone to do a complete review of the town's zoning bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Sala. Mr. Franey?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Michael Franey, 745 Washington Street.
Thank you, Sean. I vowed I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I just have a little concern here on passing over. How long is the master plan going to take to come into effect, or to research and do over? And let me just explain myself. I was born and brought up in North Abington, okay? And you know, I recently saw part of a zoning bylaw that allowed a 110-unit apartment to go in with one parking spot. Now, I don't know if anybody here has ever gone down Harrison Ave on a Saturday morning and seen the parking that we put in for Arnold's Park, but it isn't people in the playground. And I have a concern over, you know, when I was moderator and sitting on the Board of Selectmen, the zoning articles often came here and they were terribly confusing, especially to me, that I don't understand anything. But no, I just think, I have to say that I think personally it would be money well spent to have these articles gone over by an independent person, because here again, how long has that one parking spot been on the books? I don't know. I'd have to think that, well, it says in the business district. Well, at one point in time, North Abington was a business district, and we actually had a depot there. So I think the intent was to have the train stop there, but the train doesn't stop there. It stops down the other thing. The parking spots, way back when, most people only had one car. Now, 2, possibly 3. I just think that you know, some of these things, not just that one article, I like to see the development, I like to see, you know, things move forward and stuff, but I have to tell you, in my experience with the sign bylaws, with some of the other stuff we've had, the battles we've had on the floor of town meeting, we're reactive and not proactive. And personally, I would like to see us raise the money and spend it. And, you know, again, I respect all the people that are doing their job. It's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Mike, Mr. Franey, do you want to make a motion to that effect, or you just want to offer that opinion?
Well, I mean, again, I guess I don't like to waste money, but again, I'm looking at a situation where it could cost us money if it's going to take us a significant amount of time to get the master plan done.
Well, maybe I can get that answer
let me
for you.
ask you, Mr. LaFawn, would we in fact, once the master plan done, would we spend this money to have the zoning bylaws done then? Or would the master plan encompass that? So, again, we either, you know, pay me now or pay me later. I just,
Thank you, Mr. Frey. I might get an answer from, well, just want to see if someone on the planning board wanted to answer that or not. Do you know?
Go ahead, Bruce.
You don't have to step aside, Mr. Manning, but the moderator recognizes Mr. Bruce Hughes, Vice Chairman of the Planning Board, and he'll tell you all his other.
Bruce Hughes, 69 Randolph Street, Abington. You know, as a professional planner, yeah, I'd say I'd love to have, but there's a process. We're going to spend the money to update the master plan. Master plan has recommendations for these bylaw updates that need to be made, so let's just follow the process. Master plan will take about 2 years or so to get done. We're going to have a lot of public input, but there will be specific recommendations. And Mike, I hear you on this, you know, but I'd like to see the master plan, because it'll be good, because we'll get a master plan that can actually be implemented, and then we can follow the process and get the bylaws updated.
if I might, Mr. Moderator, I'm not arguing the value of a master plan. What I'm arguing is the situation we're in now, where some of the articles that could come forward, we have another big building down there. I think it was the Arnold factory. That could fall under the same thing. And I just can't comprehend how one parking spot per apartment is going to really work. But that's, again, we could stay here 2.5 years, however long you do the same thing. Then we're going to spend another year or two to study a lot of things. It isn't just, in my opinion, it isn't just this one article, you know, the parking spots and stuff like that. There are situations where, you know, setbacks and everything like that should be from an independent, outside person. I think we'd all agree that we're probably going to spend the money after the master plan. Would you agree with that? After the master plan, we'd probably agree to spend this money to have the zoning done at that point?
There's going to be a lot
Mr. Hughes, go ahead.
Excuse me. There's going to be a lot of adjustments. If you read the planning articles tonight, there's a lot of adjustments to the zoning articles, zoning in town that's going to be taking place tonight if the voters vote on them.
Thank
but
you,
no,
Mr. Hughes.
Mike, I totally hear you on this.
All right, and I apologize, but I couldn't let this pass without saying something. I had to speak my mind. Mr. Moderator, if I might, I make a motion that we raise the 75.
To approve.
Yes, thank you.
So just to explain, the Finance Committee has made a motion to pass over Article 11, which means to not fund the $75,000. Mr. Franey has now made a motion to approve Article 11 to fund the $75,000, which we always take the positive motion first. We do need a source of funding. Anyone want to? Is there a source that we can?
The source of the funding would be free cash.
Mr. Franey, if you don't mind, the Finance Committee and Town Manager are recommending that the source of your funding would be a transfer from free cash for the $75,000 if the town meeting were to approve that transfer. Before we take a motion, Mr. Shea?
Joseph Shea, 3 Wyman
Want to
Road.
approach the microphone, Joe?
Joseph Shea, 3 Wyman Road. What is the impact? Do we have the $75,000 available with the other articles scheduled for tonight? What will be the impact of using it? I don't want. I'm just concerned whether or not we could put ourselves in an override situation.
The $75,000 is budgeted for. Yes, it is available and budgeted for.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Shea's question was, if we approved everything that's on the warrant as it's funded, can we afford this other $75,000? Is there $75,000 remaining in free cash? The answer is yes.
To clarify the answer, we did not recommend to pass over it because we don't have the money. The money is budgeted for. It would just not be used if we pass over the article. So the money is there and accounted for in the balanced budget.
Mr. Collins.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. I am a member of the Planning Board. Thank you, Mr. Freni, for wanting to give the Planning Board money to spend on this. I'm in the weird position of having to say this isn't a good time to spend that money. However, we have, as you're going to be asked in a minute, we're going to be asked to do a master plan, which is basically to think about how we are going to do development in the town for the next 10 years, and to look at all the problems that we hear about, and to figure out what our priorities are for the next 10 years. To do that process at the same time that we are rewriting our entire zoning bylaw which needs desperately to be updated, it's not the right way to do it. It would result in us tripping over each other. It would add to the confusion. The right thing to do is to do the master plan, to do it quickly, to do it right, and then come back and ask for assistance to redo all of the zoning bylaws, which do need to be done. But this is, I would respectfully ask the town meeting, do not accept this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. So the motion on the table is to approve Article 11 and to fund the $75,000. So we're clear. We don't do second. And it would be, the funding source would be free cash. Anything else that's been heard on this article? If it's a majority vote, if the majority vote yes, we will fund the $75,000. If the majority does not vote yes, it will be essentially passed over. Any other questions?
I think Town Council is still questioning if we need a second.
Town Council is asking if we have a second to Mr. Franny's motion. Thank you. Traditionally in Abington, we don't do seconds. We just accept the first and know that we'll take a vote. So, once again, the motion is to approve the $75,000 to fund Article 11 per the motion of Mr. Franny. All those in favor of approving the $75,000, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The motion fails, so the Article 11 will be passed over. Article 12, to approve the amendment to the South Shore Vocational Technical Regional High School contract. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to approve Article 12 as printed in the warrant.
Finance Committee make a motion to approve Article 12 in the warrant. If there are any questions of this, the superintendent is here from the South Shore Tech, but if there aren't any questions, you can kick back and enjoy. There being none, all those in favor of approving Article 12 per the Finance Committee's motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Article 13, to fund the update of the master plan for $20,000. Mr. Sala.
The Finance Committee moves to approve Article 13 as printed in the warrant and to transfer $20,000 from free cash to meet this expenditure.
Finance Committee makes a motion to approve Article 13 as presented. Is there anything to be heard on Article 13? If not, all those in favor of approving Article 13, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. It's unanimous. Once again, if you came in late, if you are an Abington registered voter and you want to take part and be counted, you need to sit in the middle section up above or in the lower bowl. If you're sitting up in the back left, where I'm looking at you, you are all the unregistered voters or out-of-town residents who will not be counted during the vote. So if you are an Abington voter, you might want to scoot over. Okay. Article 14 is an article to extend the marijuana moratorium to June 30, 2019. Articles 14, 15, 16, and 17 all are related to marijuana and the marijuana laws in Massachusetts and how they will be implemented in Abington. Typically, we only go one article at a time for discussion purposes, and we vote, we move to the next. But given the nature of these four articles and how they are interrelated, how you vote on one may either affect or dictate how you might have to vote on the next one. I will entertain a discussion broadly on the four articles and on the questions as a whole so that we have better understanding how to proceed through this rather confusing, but hopefully we'll try to nail it down for you and make it so it makes sense to you before you take any votes. So at this time, I'm going to ask, just to start and get a motion on the floor, I believe the Finance Committee is going to make a motion, or you're going to just defer? Go right ahead.
You'll hear this from me for the rest of the night. The Finance Committee defers to the recommendation of the Planning Board.
So the Finance Committee is going to defer to the Planning Board. Typically with a lot of zoning articles, the Finance Committee will not take a position. They will look to the Planning Board, who's required by statute on zoning articles, to make a report to the town because they've held public hearings on all zoning proposals, and they make a report and usually typically the motion on the article. So the moderator will, I believe, recognize the Chairman of the Planning Board, Mr. Wayne Smith. Mr. Smith, whether you want to stay down there or come up there later, whatever you'd like to.
Wayne Smith, Planning Board Chair. There are four articles, as was mentioned earlier, on marijuana. And also there was a handout, this sheet here, that you need to look at. Just briefly, Article 14 extends the present moratorium for non-medical marijuana to June 30th, 2019, or the town could vote something different than that. Article 15, this article prohibits all types of non-medical marijuana establishments, cultivators, testing facilities, manufacturers,
retailers, and other types of licensed facilities. This change shall be effective upon passage by the voters at a town election that will have to be held. The planning board will amend the article, which you have also received, which is a white sheet, which is planning board motion on Article 15, which would allow for other uses of marijuana other than marijuana retailers. So retailers would be banned, but you would be allowed to have industrial, I'm sorry, I got the wrong one here. You would be allowed to have cultivators, testing facilities, manufacturers, but not the retail. And Article 16, we're going to make a motion to pass over, but basically it's the same. It just relates to the general bylaws as compared to zoning bylaws. And Article 17 allows non-medical marijuana and establishes regulation zones, definitions, numbers of licenses, which would be 2 in our case at present, locations and dimensional control, special permitting process, prohibit on-site smoking and eating. And it is recommended that we vote this even if we ban marijuana altogether and the election. However, if the election in the fall, perhaps the town election, votes to have marijuana in the town of Abington, we need to have this regulation in place.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'd like to recognize Town Council Greg Corbo. I've asked him to be prepared to try to give us a summary, much like Mr. Smith did, but from a Town Council point of view, to try to help explain the purpose of the 4 articles, how they relate, and how you may want to consider your votes. I'd like to, again, recognize Mr. Attorney Greg Corbo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everybody. I'll just try to give you a quick overview of what the 4 articles are, or what you're being asked to do in the 4 various articles and why. And then if there are specific questions as we go through the specifics, I'd be happy to try to answer those questions. So the first article, Article 14, is to extend the temporary moratorium on marijuana establishments. What this does is extends the cooling off period during which marijuana facilities cannot start to locate in the town. And the reason for that is that there's still some uncertainty as to whether any of these following articles will A, either be passed here tonight, B, will be approved by the Attorney General, and C, will be approved by the voters at a subsequent ballot. So what the moratorium does is it gives you sort of an insurance policy so that if something doesn't go as planned as to one of these other articles, you have time to react to that for next year's town meeting. So all that, think of that as like a cooling off period and an insurance policy in case things don't go as planned. Okay. So the second article on the blue piece of paper is described as a ban, which I think was accurate at the time that the warrant was published, but the motion you have in front of you is a little bit different than that. So what Article 15 would do is it would prohibit one type of marijuana facility in the town, marijuana retailers. In other words, you know, shops or businesses that sell to consumers directly. But what it would also do is allow other types of facilities like manufacturers, cultivators, testing laboratories to operate under special permit in certain districts of the town. Okay, so if this bylaw is approved, retailers would be prohibited everywhere in the town, and cultivators, manufacturers, and testing laboratories would be permitted in 2 zoning districts subject to a special permit. Now, because this article seeks to ban one type of marijuana establishment, and because the town of Abington generally voted in favor of legalizing marijuana, this article, in order for it to go into effect, has to be approved at a town election, either next year's annual town election or a special election held at some point between now and then. So this article requires a two-step process. It requires a 2/3 vote of approval here as a zoning bylaw. Then it requires a majority vote at a town election at some point in the future. The next article, Article 17, is being recommended to pass over. And this was put on at a time
Article 16,
I'm
excuse
sorry,
me.
16. This article is being recommended for passing over. This was essentially a duplicate of the previous article, except instead of being done as a zoning bylaw, was being done as a general bylaw. And I think as you know, the early stages of this were going on, there was some uncertainty at the state level as to whether these actions should be by zoning or general bylaw and what the effect of grandfathering would be. We now have a little bit more guidance in that regard, and you know, we're more confident that zoning is the way to address this. And so town council through the planning board would recommend that this article be passed over. And so then that leaves us with the final article, Article 17, which creates an overlay district. And so what this article would do is, rather than banning retail establishments and limiting cultivation to certain districts by special permit, it creates an overlay, and it says that all types of marijuana establishments would be within this overlay district, and then special requirements for marijuana establishments in that district would apply. So what this does is it allows all the types of marijuana establishments to go forward, but only in this limited, defined area. And we've included language in the motion that says that if the ban on retail establishments is passed at the ballot, then this bylaw proposal would be of no effect. So again, it's almost like having an insurance policy in that if you vote in favor of banning retail, and for whatever reason, either at the election or the Attorney General or something happens where that's not effective, you then have this overlay district where you get to say, all right, well, we didn't get to ban it, but at least we can limit it to this certain section of the town. So that's generally speaking what the four articles do. I hope that provided some guidance, but if there are additional questions, I'm happy to try to clarify.
All right, any questions? We'll move right along to the vote. I'm only kidding. All right. Thank you, Greg. That was very helpful, and we will, I think, go back to Greg a few times during this discussion as we move from different article to different article. But again, we'll open up to this floor to make sure that we have a good debate and we all understand what it is we're voting for or against. Sir, if you could please state your name and address.
Troy Wood, 23 Savine Street. I just have a question on Article 15. Why was it amended to, or why isn't there an option to ban it completely in the town? Everything.
We haven't got there yet, but as I understand it, well, correct me if I'm wrong, right now in Abington, medical marijuana is allowed, and last year the town voted to allow commercial and retail marijuana. Here in front of you tonight is a proposal as written to ban commercial and retail marijuana. However, I believe the planning board will be making a motion to amend that to say their proposal is to ban retail marijuana, but to allow commercial, which is indoor cultivation or testing, and of course to continue allowing medical marijuana. That's what I understand. That's why you're here.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Moderator. So my understanding is planning board motion on Article 15 is what's presently before the body. Correct?
Yeah, we haven't made that motion yet.
Okay, that's the, I'm sorry, I thought that was the motion of the planning board.
What is your question is there a proposal in front to ban all marijuana?
Well, it looks like there's, the original article is, but then it says the planning board will offer an amendment that prohibits retail shops but allows commercial operations. That sounds like a change to a complete ban, a change from a complete ban to commercial. Why isn't there, my question is, why isn't there a true Article 15 that says you can't do any of it anywhere in Abington?
Yeah. So, Mr. Moderator, through you, I would recommend that the planning board make their motion, okay? The planning board motion is going to be, as I described earlier, a ban on retail, but to allow cultivation and manufacturing by special permit in certain districts. I won't speak for the planning board, but the planning board chose to move in that way. If voters or wish to move in a different way that's within the scope of this article, it could be amended by motion to amend. But I think that the first article before you is going to be this partial ban.
Second article. First article is moratorium.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Let me do this. I'd like to put the motion for Article 14 on the floor, just so we don't overlook it. And that is going to be a motion regarding the extension of the ban. Last year, we voted for a ban that would expire June 30th of 2018. Article 14 is to propose to extend that ban to June 30th of 2019. I do need someone from the planning board to stand up and make that motion. And it looks like Chairman Smith is making his way.
The planning board moves Article 14 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, sir. That being on the table, we'll continue our discussion. We need to take that vote and then move to the question about what are we going to ban or are we not going to ban. I'm not sure which gentleman. Sorry, go right ahead. Your name and address again, sir.
Mike DeMarco, 30 Karen Lane. I have a question on 14. Last year, we delayed for a year.
Come a little closer.
Last year, we delayed for a year, and rightfully so. We had no zoning in place for it. Now we have, I believe it's Article 17, all the zoning is in place.
If approved. Yep.
Well, you know it's going to be approved. But my problem is, why delay? You get all your neighboring, Brockton, Rockland, Marshfield, Quincy, Plymouth, they're all moving forward. I think we have a town council and a town manager that could address any issues that come up. At least I hope they can. I don't see delay in this. I mean, this is revenue to the town. It really is. And people may think, well, we don't need it. It's on the table. It's a low estimate is $250,000 a year to the town on the 3% local sales tax. Although you don't have an article in here for that, but Rockland just put one in if you need it. They just passed it this week. So I think this should be go completely forward and then address it. And if you don't want to do anything, then try to ban it on the next article. Which numbers? It was a presentation that Mr. Collins put up. They did it with the marijuana. And they had a guy from the marijuana exchange, and they were basing that on medical marijuana shops on an average sell $7 million a year and 3% of $7 million. And then the town has another option to cover expenses to add another 3% for 5 years when they do the local agreement. So they could cover any expenses to the town. We ought to move forward and end this here. I mean, the people in Abington voted for it, and now, and over 8,000 people in Abington voted. Now we have, I think you said, 250 people in this hall?
Roughly.
And I'm just throwing this out, but if they vote no, so then we're going to have a special election, which will be in an off year because I called the town clerk's office. It can't be at the statewide election, this question. So now you're going to have it on a day that the selectmen pick, which means it'll be a low turnout so you can jam things through. I mean, let's be real. That's what it's all about. 8,000 people voted. Abington voted for it. Why are we trying to stop it? You're not going to stop marijuana coming into this town. You just look where it is. Rockland's opening it up down where their hotel district is. Brockton's opening it up in their Main Street area. You can drive through Quincy. You can go to Plymouth. You can go to Marshfield. Just to name a few. So you're not going to stop it coming here. The only thing you're going to stop is any revenue coming into this town.
Thank you.
And
sorry, you want to follow up? Moderator recognizes Attorney Corbo for a quick follow-up.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. Just to be clear, so the moratorium would be in effect for a period of an additional 1 year or until zoning bylaws are in place by approval at the ballot and approval by the Attorney General. So if the the zoning is approved here tonight and is ultimately approved at the election, then the moratorium automatically goes away. You don't have to wait the whole year. The reason for voting in favor of the moratorium is to protect you so that if the zoning bylaws do not get approved, if you have nothing in place, then the marijuana establishments can pretty much go anywhere, and you'd have very little to no control over them. So just to be clear, the duration of the moratorium is 1 year or until zoning is in effect, whichever is shorter.
Can I ask you to clarify one thing?
Yes.
The moratorium, if it is approved tonight, does not have to go to a ballot election.
That's correct.
That's a zoning change. A ban in any shape does have to go to a ballot election. But Article 17, which would create the zoning overlay district, does not go to a ballot election. I think you may have said that zoning has to go to ballot, but it doesn't. The ban would have to go to a ballot election because we're essentially reversing last year's ballot approval.
That's correct.
Okay.
Only the ban has to go to a ballot. Zoning in terms of, size and place restrictions do not have to go to a ballot.
Thank you. Two attorneys on a stage is dangerous, so I want to recognize Mr. Collins.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. Just to respond to the two questions that have been asked so far, Mr. DeMarco, the reason we are requesting the moratorium, and we are requesting that whether you support it or oppose it, that we put in place the moratorium for 1 more year, and here's why. The default position, if we do nothing, if we reject everything, marijuana retail shops are allowed by right in retail districts. That is the state law on the books now. If we want to change that, we have to vote in favor of something. Otherwise, they'll be allowed on Route 18, they'd be allowed in the Abington Center, Abington, North Abington, Route 123, and I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm saying that's just the fact, that the default position is that if we do nothing, they will be allowed by right. So the interest is that until we either pass a zoning bylaw and it is approved by the Attorney General, or we vote at a town election to prohibit it, we want to have this moratorium in place to make sure that we can then come back and set rules if we need to. So the other reason for the moratorium is that the Cannabis Control Commission still has not issued all their final regulations. There are still regulations to be issued about on-site consumption, whether or not you can go into a store and use marijuana there. There's also regulations to be written about whether or not there can be delivery services. And there's also a question about, do we want to see how this is implemented in some other towns before we come back next year and say, all right, this works, let's do it, or this is problematic, let's hold off. That's the reason why we are saying no matter what, we should have extend the moratorium just as kind of a protection level. Let's get back to the other question over here. If you oppose retail marijuana, if you oppose any sort of marijuana uses in the town of Abington, you will vote no on the planning board amendment to Article 15, and then you will vote yes on the underlying article. It's confusing. I apologize for that. I didn't write Robert's Rules of Order. But, so again, just to be clear, if you oppose, if you do not want marijuana in Abington, you will vote no on the planning board's amendment to Article 15. And then you will vote yes on Article 15, the underlying one, just to clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Before we go any further, I was just asking Attorney Corbett, I want to make one thing clear too. Nothing that happens tonight is going to change medical marijuana. The only proposals tonight are dealing with the commercial marijuana and the retail marijuana. Okay, if you notice the motion Article 14, no, sorry, it would be in Article 15 is for other than non-medical marijuana bans are being discussed. Just so that's clear, we're not taking away medical marijuana tonight. It's not on the table. Sir, name and address.
Alan Kalman, 52 Mill Street. I'm wondering comparatively, what kind of restrictions do we have on alcohol stores, retail establishments?
His name? Sir, can I get your name once again for the record?
I'm sorry, Alan Kalman.
Kalman, thank you, Mr. 52 Mill. I don't know who can answer that question. You asked comparatively what kind of restrictions are on a liquor store versus a marijuana store. I just think that's, I'm sorry, there's no one in here that can direct knowledge. I think it's just general knowledge. I think your point is well taken, maybe.
Got to be 21.
There you go. Sir, Mr. DeMarco.
Yeah, I just want to, was it Rick Collins?
Yes.
Okay. Two things he mentioned was on-site use and home delivery that they haven't ruled on. I looked it up today. They delayed that for another year. So those things are off the table for another year anyhow. So this doesn't
Okay.
make any sense again. I mean,
Thank you, Mr. DeMarco.
and to answer this question, you both got to be 21 years old to go in a liquor store and buy, and you got to be 21 years old to go into a adult marijuana store to buy.
Thank you. Sir, name and address once again. Let's try to keep the applause down just so we can keep the debate moving along. I don't want to have either side, positive or negative. Thank you.
Troy Wood, 23 Savine Street. I just have a question on whether or not Article 14 has any bearing on Article 15. So if you vote for the moratorium, does it affect question 15 in any way? Does it negate it in any way, or?
So the answer to your question is, does 14 affect 15? No, but 15 affects 14 in that if 15 is passed and goes into effect, then 14 goes away.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Chris Coyle, 154 Karen Lane. I have a quick question on Article 17. The zoning district, is it able to be defined more where, like, places we can understand? Just looking at the map is tough, especially in black and white on here. Like, can somebody just speak to, I don't know, roads or locations, landmarks, whatever?
If we could get that screen back up there. And correct me if I'm wrong, to anyone who knows more, what we're looking at is the northern end of town. The light blue or light purple area is what's currently known as the Technology Business District. Essentially, it is Route 18 goes up. You can see that line that goes up, that's Route 18, and it is bordered on the right, the light blue or light purple is bordered on the right by Adams Street, Route 58. So Adams Street splits the light purple and the gray. The proposal in Article 17 is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, marijuana overlay would be in the light blue, light purple, and the gray area. It has all the X's in there. It is, in the light blue area is basically the property north of Sorrell's and north of the Abington Ale House, roughly. Might be exactly, but that's my best description. And you can see the industrial zone, which is the gray zone, is on the eastern side of Adams Street, where Coal Tar is. Some people call it the pit up there. Those restricted areas would be the overlay district where marijuana facilities could be located if this body makes those decisions. Is that fair? Anyone want to, am I incorrect or, well, there's a gentleman right in front of you, but,
Yeah.
Okay.
Doug Murray, 287 High Street. How many facilities actually we're actually talking about? Somebody said 2 licenses. Does that apply to all manufacturing, distribution, and retail? So you could have 2 shops and that's it?
It's a great question. Anyone want to provide that answer?
I think the regulation, Wayne Smith, Planning Board, the regulations refer to liquor licenses in town, and it could be 1 for every 5 or greater fraction thereof. So in Abington, it would be 2. That would be how many establishments? 2.
Which would be, do we know the answer to that yet?
That would be my
Retail
opinion, and I'm not an attorney.
Attorney Corbo is indicating, and I don't want to speak for him, but just to move it along, that the formula that is in the bylaw and from the state would be a limitation on the number of retail licenses. Is that correct? Maximum of 2. Why do you say minimum? Mr. Collins, who has been working on this, says that, is that state regulation, says that you have to have a minimum of 2 in our town because of the number of licenses, but the town can enact restrictions to maximize it at 2, which I believe there's language in Article 17. If you disagree with that, Town Council, we're going with you. No offense to Mr. Collins.
Okay, so this is with respect to the overlay district only, okay? And this is on page 11 of your warrant. I don't know what color the
Number of
I think it's
licenses.
white. Yep. Okay.
The bottom half, right in the middle of the page, on page 11, this says section blank, number of licenses. That's what Attorney Corbo is directing your attention to.
Okay, and what it says is the number of recreational marijuana retailers permissible to be located in the MOD shall be limited to 20% of the number of licenses issued within the town for the retail sale of alcoholic beverages not to be drunk on the premises. Okay, so these are your package stores or any place where you go to buy alcohol and carry it away. All towns in the Commonwealth currently have a quota on the number of liquor licenses that they can issue. And what this says is that, assuming that you're at your quota, which I believe that you are, you can issue retail marijuana licenses equal in number to 20% of the number of liquor licenses issued. So as things stand right now, that would be 2. If at some point in the future your quota for liquor licenses increases and you issue more liquor licenses, then the number of marijuana retail licenses that can be issued would also increase so that it's always at 20% of that number.
What we're referencing there is part of Article 17 if it is implemented tonight. How many growers can be in town, since this specifically is limiting retailers? That's the question.
That's right.
Right.
So we're only specifically limiting retailers to a certain number. There's not a limit on the other types of establishments, but there are other things like, setbacks and lot area and physical space dimensions that may practically limit the number of other of those types of establishments that come in, but there is no hard number in this proposed bylaw.
Thank you. And again, Article 14 is pending on the floor. Mr. Negrelli.
Just a little bit different here. Where are you showing the industrial up there?
The gray.
I was in Town Hall today, I was looking over the wild wetlands map, and it showed rare species and habitat of rare wildlife dated August 1st, 2017. And it actually goes right into that industrial area. Have we built in there, or?
There's nothing to say that this is buildable land or that at all.
Okay, all right.
Okay? It's just where it's located. True of any zone. If you have wetlands, you have to abide by the wetlands laws. I don't want to testify here, but Mr. Burbine.
Andrew Burbine, 30 Lantern Lane. Greg, is there anything in here about the 3% local option tax?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, no. This is zoning only. There is a provision in the general laws, which is a local acceptance, which would allow you to tax retail sales. That is not on this warrant. If that's something the town's interested in, it would have to be on a future town meeting warrant.
Mr. Burbine?
I think there's a lot of things that still need to be worked out on this. I think at a minimum, we ought to pass Article, what it is, the first one, 14. The moratorium for another year, so we can get things like, if we want to have marijuana sold here, the 3% tax. I'm sure the Board of Health would like to talk about maybe implementing some regulations, give them some time to do that. So at a minimum, I think we should do the moratorium. Personally, I think we should ban it entirely, but at a minimum, I think we should do the moratorium.
Thank you, Mr. Burbine. Mr. Norley, can we go back to number 14? Let's hold that down. Number 14 on the screen. So the motion on the floor is to approve Article 14, which would extend the moratorium to June 30th of 2019. To extend this moratorium, it requires a 2/3 vote because we're actually amending an existing zoning bylaw. Is there anything else to be heard on this Article 14? Otherwise, I'd like to move forward with this vote. All right. All those in favor of approving Article 14 to extend the moratorium to June 30th, 2019, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. I'm going to try that one more time. Well, actually, let's do this in a show of hands. The moderator can declare a two-thirds vote if it's relatively obvious. Otherwise, if it's not obvious with a hand vote, we'll have to have a standing count. All those in favor of approving the moratorium, or extending the moratorium to June 30th, 2019, please raise your hand. Okay, you can put your hands down. All those opposed to extending the moratorium? I think the two-thirds vote has passed, given a show of hands here in the auditorium tonight. So the moratorium will pass. Article 14 passes to extend the moratorium. You can question that. If 7 people want to question my count, we can do a standing count. If 7 people want to join you, stand up. You're not going to offend me if you want to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up top. 6. All right, we're going to have a standing count. Thank you. This is democracy in its purest form. So, if I could have our counters please stand up. Mr. Wing, Mr. Keogh, Mr. Shea, Mr. Smith. If you could approach the front of your sections. What we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is ask, when I ask you to, those who are in favor of extending the moratorium are going to stand and remain standing in your area until your counter asks you to sit. And we'll kind of work backward so that they can make their counts. So if you could cooperate with us, that would be nice. And Mr. Wing, don't forget to count the Finance Committee. All those in favor of extending the moratorium to June 30, 2019, please stand and remain standing until asked or directed to sit. Or you can go to the microphone if you'd like. Mr. Wing?
54.
Mr. Shea?
40.
I'm sorry?
40.
40. Mr. Keogh?
50. 50.
50. Mr. Smith? 21. All those who would like to oppose the moratorium, please stand and remain standing until you're asked to be seated. Mr. Shea?
3.
3. Mr. Keogh?
15. 15.
15. 15. Mr. Wing?
20.
20. Mr. Smith? 7. Give me a minute. I did go to Abington High School, have a pretty good math background. I'll just make sure.
Sorry, correction, 8.
Sorry. Oh, geez, Rich. Just going to confer with my numbers. $211 voters being present and voting, with 165 voting in the affirmative to extend it. That is 78%, which exceeds the two-thirds threshold. So Article 14 to extend the moratorium does pass. Sir? Three, 15, 20, and 8, which I believe totals 46. Those in the affirmative were 165, for a total of 211. Sorry, I should have told you those numbers also. So Article 14 passes. That brings us to Article 15. Planning Board would like to make a motion on Article 15 to put that on the table?
The Planning Board moves Article 15 as printed in the handout entitled Planning Board Motion on Article 15.
So the planning board makes a motion pursuant to the handout for Article 15. And just so I can review, make sure we all understand what we're doing. I believe that motion is to ban retail marijuana only. It would allow commercial marijuana, which would be the growing and cultivating testing of marijuana, correct? That is the motion on the floor. That would also require a two-thirds vote. Is anything to be heard on this motion? Sir.
Troy Wood, 23 Sabine Street. I'd just like, if possible, is it Mr. Collins to come back up and explain what the voting options are on Article 15 so we're all clear on it? I think he was very clear. I just want to hear it again.
Certainly, Mr. Wood. Mr. Collins here, by demand.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. Thank you for your confidence. So Article 15 would prohibit any sort of retail, commercial, wholesale marijuana activity in the town of Abington. The planning board has voted that we think this is a little short-sighted, and at the very least, we should allow commercial, wholesale operations in the town of Abington. That includes growing it, cultivating it, turning it into liquids, turning it into edibles, serving as a transfer operations to go to retail shops. The only thing, testing it, research, the only thing that would not be allowed under the planning board's amendment would be retail sales. Bridgewater has done a similar amendment so that it can cash in at least on the commercial operations. Another town just, do you know which town just passed it, Bruce? The other town did a similar one. There's a couple of towns that have gone this route, which is to say, we understand the concerns about the retail side of it, but we would encourage, or we would allow the commercial wholesale side in town. Again, that would not be open to retail purchases, if that makes sense. So again, if you want no marijuana activity in town, you would vote no on this further amendment. If you are okay with a retail ban, but you want the commercial activity, you will vote yes.
Let me tweak that a bit. Okay? The motion, the only motion, it's not an amendment, it's a motion that's made right now, is to ban retail use in Abington. That requires a two-thirds vote to pass that ban against retail use only. If the two-thirds vote fails, then we don't have any ban. If someone then wants to stand up and make a vote to ban retail and commercial, we'll see if that gets a two-thirds vote. That may or may not pass. If either one of them passes, it has to be confirmed by a later ballot election. Okay? So if a ban passes tonight, it has to also pass the ballot election, or there is no ban of any sort. Correct? Okay? Every town's going through this, not just us. Briefly, Mr. DeMarco, you're full of knowledge, but go ahead. Or are you, who was up first? I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Okay. Mike DeMarco, 30 Karen Lane.
Right to the microphone.
Mike DeMarco, 30 Karen Lane. All right. Question for a little over 8,700 people voted in the general election. 52.66% of the residents voted for it. Now we have 211 residents in the hall tonight to make a decision to rescind what people voted for in the town. If you vote for this and it goes to a ballot, it cannot go to another general, I called the town clerk's office today. It has to be it cannot go in the state election. It has to go on one of these, a date picked by the selectmen. And you know what happens. I mean, we're now back into a special interest group to get something done. Banning marijuana in this town does nothing except prevent revenue from coming in this town. If you want something, Rockland just passed, they're opening up where the hotels are down in, down by the expressway there. Brockton, they haven't done it yet, but the mayor's saying he's going to open up on down in downtown, the main street downtown in Brockton. So marijuana's coming here anyhow. Whether you're not, probably here now anyhow, kind of so easy to get by anyone. But, so the bottom line is, why don't you want the revenue? I mean, we passed a local meals tax, which, because one of the arguments was other people from out of town would be helping us. The Community Preservation Act added, minus 100 grand, 1.5% on our tax rate to do good things for the town. Now this is going to add revenue to the town, which we don't know what's going to happen. I know when I was watching the Republican candidates, people running for selectmen, one of the candidates happened to mention she was against the full-day kindergarten because there's things we don't know about with the high school that's going to incur some more costs, and she didn't want to put any more tax burden on us. Now, people like me that are retired, I mean, we're not working, so we don't get raises every year, but we live with it. So this is income to the town. It's 3% of sales.
Thank you, Mr. DeMarco.
So I think, and if you go to a special town meeting, you get to pay, it's going to cost, according to the town clerk's office, another $7,000 to run that. So, and like I say, unless you get people organized to go and you get a low voter turnout and you get what you want. And that's the way things are played.
Thank you, Mr. DeMarco. The moderator recognizes Mr. Richard Testa.
Richard Testa, 121 Presidential Drive. I have more questions than I do answers, so please bear with me. I've heard a number of references to the town voting in favor of marijuana. So I would just ask for clarification as to what did the town vote for by the 52% margin? That would be fantastic.
Does anybody else other than Mr. DeMarco want to answer that question?
Because we're referencing that the town voted in favor of marijuana, but I believe it was a much larger vote that was taking place. The vote was not to allow marijuana in the town of Abington, I believe. I believe it was...
Mr. Collins is right behind you, Mr. Testa. I think
you please answer that, Mr.
elucidate.
The Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. The vote was the November 2016 general election. There was a ballot question, a statewide ballot question on the ballot that was about the legalization of the retail sale of marijuana in Massachusetts. That was what the vote was.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for clarifying. It was specific to the state of Massachusetts, not to the specific community in which we reside. Okay.
Mr. Corbo wants to clarify that. Attorney Corbo.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Moderator. So, yes, it was a statewide ballot question to legalize marijuana in the state. However, statistics were kept for each individual town, and the state statute that was ultimately enacted places significance on whether your town voted in majority in favor of that statewide ballot question. So if your town, the majority of people in your town voted in favor of that question, that's what triggers the two-step process for enacting this ban, the zoning bylaw and the ballot question. In communities where less than half of the people supported the statewide ballot question, they only have to approve a ban by zoning bylaw at town meeting. So that's why we're referencing what Abington voted in favor of. So the majority of people in Abington voted in favor of that statewide ballot initiative. That's why we need the two-step process.
Thank you, Attorney Corbo. Mr. Testa.
Follow-up question. So the premise under which people would support marijuana in the town, whether it be in the form of retail or dispensary, is increased tax revenue. However, no one has been able to lay out a plan as to what the increased tax revenue would be, and it doesn't appear that we have any clear understanding as to what that equates to at this point. Additionally, I think there are a number of different revenue sources that we could explore if the concern is increasing income to the town. We're one of the few communities that does not have a split tax rate. That is a way that a number of our communities around us have raised additional tax funds. So I think to look at one particular revenue source in a vacuum and not explore all revenue sources is extremely short-sighted on the part of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Moderator recognizes Mrs. Platty. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm just gonna. So
Right to the microphone, Katie.
Sorry, Kate Platty, 45 Baxter Ave. Again, I'm sorry. I'm super confused by these articles, and I just wanted a clarification. We have to vote on the motion on the floor before another person can make a motion to pass over Article 15? Is that what you said?
We always vote for the positive motion first, so even if you did make a motion to pass it over, I'd have to go with the motion to approve first.
Okay. All right, and then, so with Article 17, I know we're on Article 15, but with Article 17, if we approve Article 17, doesn't that take care of all the minutia about where dispensaries or, whatever can be placed?
Again, I'll answer it for everybody. If Article 17 was in front of you now and you approve the zoning bylaw, there's still a question of what can be located there, retail and commercial or just commercial?
Okay, so can I just, thanks. So we've just voted to approve a moratorium.
Yes.
Which gives us a year to hammer out all the, are we charging 3%? Are we allowed to have where it can be, what it can be? So why are we even talking about banning this? We've given it a whole year. Can't we continue to just come back at town meeting time and time again and keep adding to that moratorium if we can't come to an agreement or we can't?
Attorney Corbo. Cotman and Page, Boston, Massachusetts.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. I was with you all the way until you said, can't we come back again and again? And the answer to that is no. A moratorium is designed to be of limited duration to allow you to conduct and complete a planning process. So all of these zoning bylaws have to be approved by the Attorney General's office. We've every reason to believe that the Attorney General will give you another 1 year, but we think it's highly unlikely that you would get yet another year after that unless you could show some compelling reason why within this year you couldn't get a zoning bylaw done. So you can't necessarily come back again and again and just keep extending the moratorium. It has to end at some point.
Okay, so the wording, the moratorium can't come back up, but it says right here, the town takes the issue up again at a future town meeting, right? So in 50 years from now, I could come up and say, I want to sell pot at 45 Baxter Ave, which I don't, by the way. I just want to make that clear.
She doesn't even live there. I know you do.
I do, and I'm not selling pot, I swear.
Yes, we can't bind a future town meeting from doing what they want to do.
Okay.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Lauren Van Luling, 58 Van Buren Drive. I'd just like to thank Rich for his comments. I agree with Rich's comments. I'm just here as a nurse and an advocate for the kids in town. I think it's great that other towns have approved it. I'm going to have retail stores. I'm completely against it in our little town. It has really done horrible things in Denver, and I want everyone here to know that it really is not the best for our little town.
Thank you, Mr. Van Luling. Mr. Shea.
Joseph Shays, 3 Wyman Road. First, in response to Mr. Testa, a split tax rate does not increase revenues to the town. It simply redistributes who pays the taxes, but will not bring in any additional revenues. Secondly, a comment was made that the only reason we're looking at this is because of revenues. At least in my view, we are looking at it because the townspeople did vote in favor of the law. I assume that they had an idea what they were voting for. I agree. I have concerns about retail shops, but I think the planning board's suggestions are good ones to follow through on. So I recommend that we go ahead with the planning board's motions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Yes, ma'am. Name and address.
Laura McCoy, 95 Spruce Street. I wanted to comment on the Denver. I lived there for 20 years. I have family that's still there, and that's not true. Their schools are doing amazing. The schools in the poorest districts now have everything that the wealthier districts do. There has been nothing negative. It is not everywhere on the streets. 2 of my children still live there. Like I said, and we have many aunts and uncles there. So there has been no negative effect that they have seen. And I tend to believe the people that are living there. That's it.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Franny, we'll try to move on to the vote.
Okay. Me, Joe Franny, 12 Platt Street. First of all, I want to make a statement. You 52% voted for them, for the marijuana. Where are they tonight? Second of all, what I want to say is...
All righty, all righty.
Second of
Thank
all,
you.
when I've been reading on this, and I thought you don't get 3%, you get 2% because the state takes 1%. Is that correct, or did I misunderstand that?
Attorney Corbo, C-O-R-B-O.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. I believe that the statute says that you can specify up to 3%.
Up to 3%.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
What's the chief's, what does the police chief feel on this?
I don't know. A couple more very brief comments. I think we have heard both sides. Yes, ma'am. Maybe we'll try to wrap it up.
Martha Kraft, 175 Damon Road. I'm just a little bit confused here.
That's okay.
15. This is my understanding of what I'm voting on. 15, first of all, needs an amendment before we vote. Someone going to make that amendment soon, I hope. But if there is an amendment, that amendment needs a 2/3 vote?
What is printed in the warrant under Article 15 is a ban against commercial and retail use.
Okay.
That's our subject matter. That's the warrant article. The amendment being proposed, the motion being proposed, is to ban only the retail use.
Okay.
So that Abington would then allow medical and commercial. Commercial will be limited to that, well, if 17 passes, to that zoning district.
Well, just let's do 15 for right now.
Right.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. So everyone understands what we're voting on. There was a handout titled Planning Board Motion on Article 15. Does everybody have that?
No, not the blue one. The blue sheet is an information sheet.
It's white.
There is a white motion entitled Planning Board Motion on Article 15.
That's not in the warrant?
Nope,
It's not in the
was on
warrant.
the
It was an
table.
extra handout.
And we're voting on that as opposed to what's written in the warrant right now?
Yes, that's correct. Okay?
It does not require an amendment first?
No, it does not.
The warrant, sorry, the article that's printed is to give you notice on the subject matter we're going to talk about. When we get to the town meeting, as we've seen throughout the night, someone has to make a motion to approve what's printed or to approve something slightly different, but it has to be within that same scope. That's what's being proposed here now, is what's
On the
printed but
warrant.
not the retail.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
confused
sorry,
about
not
this.
the commercial.
What's in the warrant I'm hearing is not what we're voting on. There is another piece of paper up there that we're supposed to have that we're voting on. Was that posted, what is it, 2 weeks ago that it had to be posted, or was just the warrant posted?
The warrant was posted. That's all that need be to tell us what we're going to discuss here at town meeting. You could, it doesn't have to be the
It's-
planning board make that motion. Anyone could make that motion to amend an article or to propose a
I
motion
understand that,
that's
but I guess my question is then, is someone going to stand up and amend what's in this warrant to state what's being handed out as a separate piece of paper?
No. The motion is, so what the warrant does is, the warrant gives the voters notice of the subject matter of what's going to be voted on. The warrant article itself doesn't actually come in front of town meeting. Rather, what comes in front of town meeting is a motion. In many circumstances, the motion takes the same form as the warrant article, but it doesn't have to. So in this case, the planning board decided that their motion, rather than being what was specified in the warrant, is what's specified in the handout. If someone wishes to change what's in the handout, they can then make a motion to amend. But as of right now, we are voting on what's in the handout. And to make it clear, if everybody could turn to the last page in the handout.
Well, could I go up and get a handout? Because I certainly didn't pick that up when I came in.
Absolutely.
Let me say it a different way. If the warrant said a motion to ban dogs and cats in Abington, and someone stood up and said, I make a motion to ban cats only, that would be appropriate. The warrant told you what we're going to talk about. It's something, in a really weird way, similar to what we're doing.
Thank you very much. All right, so what we are voting on right now, is it to ban everything, or is it to only ban retail?
Right. The
It's
motion on the
right,
floor is to
yes.
ban retail from the town of Abington.
Only.
If that passes by 2/3 tonight, it then must go to a ballot election for confirmation.
Okay.
That must pass
Thank
by 50%.
you. That was the second part of that question.
So, Mr. Moderator, if I could clarify, I think if everybody turns to the last page of the handout, the chart. Okay? Again, the handout that's titled Planning Board Motion on Article 15. Okay? The very last page is a chart. It's actually an excerpt from the zoning use
here.
table. Okay?
I've got it in
And what this chart does is, it sets forth all of the zoning districts in the town of Abington.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Okay.
And it creates two categories. The first category is non-medical marijuana retailers. And what you'll see is that it's N across all zoning districts. So that's what we're referring to as the ban on marijuana retailers. The second category is non-medical marijuana establishments excluding retailers. That's everything else. That's the cultivation, the manufacturing, and the testing. And what you'll see is that that's N across the board, except for allowed by special permit in the I and the TB district. Okay? What the rest of the handout does is it sets forth definitions and requirements for the issuance of those special permits. But the essence of what you're voting on is to ban retail throughout the town and to allow manufacturing and cultivation in those two districts by special permit. Okay, so if you're in favor of banning retail and limiting cultivation and manufacturing, you vote yes. If you're not in favor, you vote no.
Thank you, Attorney Corbo. All right.
Okay. I will leave the rest of my clarification on that to another day.
Thank you.
Now, so if we vote Article 15, we're voting no on retail. 16, you're going to recommend to pass over. We get to 17. 17 allows retail in the zone. So what 17 is doing is creating a zone in which both retail and commercial can exist. That would then need to go, if it gets passed tonight, it goes to the state for approval and comes back here if approved, which probably would, I would assume. And then we're good to go, and that will negate 14, which we've already passed anyway.
Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. So, yeah, so my only sort of clarification on that is that if 17 is passed, then, or I should say, if 15 is passed and 17 is passed, okay, 17 would go away unless 15 fails at the ballot. So 17 is the safeguard against a negative ballot vote, right? Because 15 needs both town meeting action and ballot action, okay? So if 15 passes and 17 passes, okay, and 15 passes at the ballot, 17 goes away.
What about commercial, though? Commercial would go into that district, 17.
Can I just to make it easy?
Yes.
If
you can make it easy, I'd love to hear that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Just to make it easy. So if we vote down 15 and vote up 17, we're all set to go. I got to get going.
I'm going to repeat one more time. The motion on the floor is essentially to ban retail marijuana only, what would allow commercial. If that passes by more than a 2/3 vote, you've passed a ban against retail marijuana. If it does not pass by 2/3, well, subject to a later ballot election. If you do not pass the motion to ban retail marijuana by more than 2/3, then there is no ban of retail marijuana. I would then, if the body would like to, entertain a motion to approve the original article, which is a motion to ban commercial and retail, to see if that passes by 2/3 or not. That's where we're heading, okay?
But to simplify it,
Mr. Drew,
yeah.
I'm going to let this one woman speak right after, and then we're going to move the question.
But to simplify it, if 15 gets voted down, down, down.
No ban, no ban, no ban.
No bans, no nothing. And then we get to 17.
Yep.
And it gets voted up.
Yes.
We will have commercial and retail in a specific zone.
That's exactly correct.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Well, why didn't you just ask? All right. Name and address.
Hi, Shannon Tenori, 170 Wyman Road. I just would like to make a motion to move to vote.
Thank you. Makes a motion to move the question. So we have to take a vote on that. A motion to move the questions is a simple majority vote. A motion, if you say aye, you would be stopping debate. We'll move directly to the vote. If you say no, it means you want to talk and debate more about it. All those in favor of moving the question, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Unanimous. All righty. So we move to Article 15, the Planning Board's motion, which would be an enact a ban against retail use but not commercial use in the town of Abington. If it passes by more than 2/3, it would be subject to a later ballot box vote at a time and date to be set by the Board of Selectmen. Understood? So if you want to vote yes for the ban of if you want to ban retail, you're going to vote yes. If you do not want to ban, you'd vote no. All those in favor of the Planning Board's motion in Article 15, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Moderator declares that it did not pass. The 2/3 vote was not attained. Would anyone like to make a motion on Article 15, and we'll move forward? If people leave, it's their own problem, and I would advise you to stay throughout the meeting until it is ended. We have a quorum. We have more than 150 people here. Mr. Burbine's making a motion to approve Article 15 as presented in the warrant. Is that correct, Mr. Burbine? Mr. Burbine's made a motion to approve Article 15 as proposed in the warrant, which effectively, if 2/3 of you approve it, will be a ban against commercial and retail. If 2/3 do not vote for it, there is no ban. Right? Right. All those in favor of approving Article 15 as print... Yes, Katie? Can you just repeat that? Yes. I'm going to ask you for a vote now on Article 15 as it's printed, which is for a ban against commercial and retail marijuana in Abington. Not medical. Medical is there. This, if you vote yes, if 2/3 or more vote yes, it would be a ban against commercial and retail moving forward if this is a successful vote tonight and it passes at the ballot later. If we do not get a 2/3 vote tonight, there is no ban. We have the moratorium. We move forward to Article 16 and 17. All those, any other questions? All those in favor of approving Article 15 as printed in the warrant to ban commercial and residential marijuana in the town of Abington, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed to the ban, please signify by saying no. No. That ban fails. Democracy in action. We move forward to Article 16, correct? Correct? All right. We move forward to Article 16. The Planning Board is going to make a motion on Article 16. Thank you for your patience and for respecting each other's opinions.
Planning Board moves to pass over Article 16.
Planning Board moves to pass over Article 16 due to some of the reasons stated earlier. They believe now that it is unnecessary to enact a general bylaw. Anything to be heard on Article 16? Otherwise, this would be a majority vote to pass it over. Yes, sir.
Tim Chapin, 353 Center Ave. I just want to, for a point of clarification, this does not need a 2/3 vote, right? This would enact a ban at a 50+1?
This is, their motion is to pass over this article and not take any action on Article 16. So if you voted yes, we're just skipping by, we're rejecting Article 16 now. Article 16 was a proposal to amend our general bylaws, not our zoning bylaws, to create a ban.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve Article 16 as written.
Okay. I just blacked. What's your name?
Chapin.
Thank you, Mr. Chapin. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen.
Now I know who didn't vote for me.
So, That was good, I'll give you that. So now, if I get some guidance on this, to amend the general bylaws as presented by Mr. Chapin it is, do we need a 2/3 vote to amend the general bylaws? No, it's a majority vote. And, not 9/10. And we're not sure if there's a question or not whether this would be effective or not, but that can be dealt out later. We have the moratorium in effect. Is that right? So, Mr. Chapin's motion is to approve Article 16 to enact a general bylaw which would ban commercial and retail marijuana at a general bylaw level. Anything to be discussed on that article? Otherwise, we're going to go right to a vote. Yes, Mr. Burbine. Mr. Burbine asked the town council what the difference is between the zoning article that did not pass and this general bylaw which is being proposed.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, the answer to the question is we don't know yet. You know, this is still early in the process, and we don't know if the Attorney General is going to approve of this type of regulation as a general bylaw, or if they will find that this has to be done solely through zoning. However, at this point, it's on the warrant. The town does have the ability to enact general bylaws to exercise its general police powers. We think that this is within the scope of those police powers, and if you're in favor of this, you can enact this by majority vote. It still has to go to the ballot question, and it still has to be reviewed by the Attorney General.
Thank you for that explanation.
Hi, Rory Manning, 34 Orange Street. I have a question. If this passes, does that negate 17? Because if we're passing a general bylaw to ban it, then why would we be regulating it on 17?
I know the answer, but I'd like Attorney Corbo to say that.
We haven't gotten to 17 yet, but the motion under Section 17 would say, this section will only be applicable upon a negative vote at a town election on a ballot question to prohibit all types of non-medical marijuana establishments as defined in Chapter 94G, Section 1. Okay, so what you're doing in Section 17 is, again, you're saying if now the vote under 16 should fail at the ballot, 17 is the fallback that says, okay, it's allowed, but it can only go in these certain places.
So now 16 will still require a special election that will cost the town money.
That's correct.
Thank you.
If it passes. Okay, so if 16 passes, we would go to a special election to see if that gets confirmed at the ballot box. 17 is being suggested as a fallback provision in case, assuming this passes, in case the ballot box does not pass. Quick question?
Ann Manning, 34 Orange Street. If we pass this, does it negate the ban that we just voted down?
Ultimately, that's a question for the Attorney General or the courts, but yes, that's the intent, is to replace the previous negative or failure to get a 2/3 vote under zoning. I think the intent here is to see if you can get a majority under a general bylaw to replace that negative vote.
Okay, then. Sir, state your
Mr.
name.
Moderator, question for Town Council, just a legal
Will
question.
you state your name and address, Chief?
Yep, John Otto, 84 Constitution Avenue,
Thank you.
Fire Chief. Assuming anything passes tonight, the will of the voters, I get that. Would this affect the town or any individual department within the town's ability to receive any federal funding or grants?
I am not aware of any specific programs that would deprive the town of grant money if it were to take this action. You know, the sale of marijuana is allowed at the state level. What you're doing here is either deciding to prohibit it, or if it's going to be allowed, saying it can only go in certain places. I'm not aware of any specific advisories or anything to suggest that that type of action would jeopardize or take away any grant funding that you might otherwise be eligible for.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve Article 16, which would create a ban of commercial and retail in the general bylaws, and if it passes by more than 50%, it would be subject to later ballot box confirmation. If you're not in favor of the ban, you would vote no on this motion. If you're in favor of the ban, you'd vote yes. Okay? Thank you. All those in favor of Article 16 to enact a ban under the general bylaws for both commercial and retail, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. No. The noes have it. Article 16 fails. We move on to Article 17. Article 17, which is the creation of the Marijuana Overlay District, or the MOD. Mr. Testa? Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, huh? If 7 people want to question that, sure. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 7. You're putting your hand up for 7. Yep. All right. So we're gonna. We have to do a standing vote to do a count. So if my counters can assume the position. This is for Article 16. Richard, okay, so if you are in favor of approving the ban as set forth in a new general bylaw under Article 16, if you want to approve the ban for commercial and retail, please rise, please stand and remain standing until your counter directs you to be seated. Mr. Keogh?
21.
21. Mr. Wing?
24.
24. Mr. Shea?
20.
20. All right, Rich? Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, 9. All those opposed to the ban under the general bylaw, please rise and remain standing until you're asked to sit by your counter. Mr. Smith? 12. Mr. Wing?
36.
36. First one to the microphone. Mr. Keogh?
36.
36. Mr. Shea?
14.
14. I know you're all doing the math in your own heads, and I know you already know the answer, but with 172 votes being cast, the yeses were 74, the noes were 98. The proposed ban does not pass. Article 16 does not pass. Article 17, which is the proposal to create the Marijuana Overlay District, another zoning proposal. Motion on the floor by the Planning Board, please.
The Planning Board...
Mr. Smith, Attorney, if you talk to Attorney Corbo, I think I'd know his name by now. While we have this break in the action, I want to let you know that the 2018 summer concerts will be starting on Sunday, starting on June 24th. Overdrive, an 8-piece band with a killer 4-piece horn section, that's what's written, on the 24th. These are great concerts. If you haven't been to the bandstand, the Nisbee Bandstand, right across the parking lot from the library, there is a schedule out there and online for the Sunday summer concerts. They're free, starting on June 24th. Mr. Smith.
The Planning Board moves that the town vote to add a new section in sequential order under Article 5, Use Regulations, to be titled Recreational Marijuana Overlay District, and to amend the zoning map for purposes of regulating recreational use marijuana establishments within the town, including establishments for the cultivation, processing, testing, product manufacturing, and retail sale of recreational use marijuana, which uses may be allowed pursuant to the issuance of a special permit and site plan approval within the designated marijuana overlay district, as shown in Article 17 in the warrant, with the insertion of the following language to the end of the proposed bylaw.
You got to read the following language. Oh, we should have stopped, I'm sorry. So the motion, Wayne, I'm going to have to, let me read the motion, make sure we have this in the record correctly. You added some extra language, but I'm guessing is not necessary. So the motion on the floor is the planning board moves that the town vote to add a new section in the sequential order under Article 5 use regulations to be titled, quote, recreational marijuana overlay district, unquote, and to amend the zoning map for purposes of regulating recreational use marijuana establishments within the town, including establishments for the cultivation, processing, testing, product manufacturing, and retail sale of recreational use marijuana, which uses may be allowed pursuant to the issuance of a special permit and site plan approval within the designated marijuana overlay district as shown in Article 17 in the warrant. Period. That is the motion. We effectively, if two-thirds or more of you approve this, you would be creating the marijuana overlay district and its associated restrictions. If a, I'll end it at that. Any questions? No questions. We've beaten a dead horse. Mr. Shea, you sure you want to ask this question? Go ahead. Oh, geez, you got beaten.
Alan Kalman, 52 Mill.
Mr. Kalman.
Just want to make sure, if we vote no on this, it could be anywhere in town.
Correct? It can be in commercial districts. Highway,
Any
it can be where other businesses could be.
Okay,
If you approve this, you're restricting it more so than if we had no no marijuana overlay district. Does this negate number 14, which was the extension of the moratorium? It would. If this is approved, it negates the moratorium. If we approve this zoning change tonight, it gets submitted to the Attorney General as all zoning changes are due for their approval. Upon approval, it's retroactive to actually the date of the publication of the hearing.
So, yes, through you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, so, again, the moratorium is only in place for 1 year or until a zoning bylaw is passed. If this passes and then is ultimately approved by the Attorney General, the moratorium would go away and this would be your bylaw.
And if it does not pass, the moratorium is in place, assuming the Attorney General approves that. We're all learning a lot tonight. Civics.
Kate Platty, 45 Baxter Ave. I just want clarification because it can't be anywhere, right? It can't just be anywhere. It also can't be within a certain distance between schools, playgrounds, places where kids congregate.
Or 45
right?
Thaxter Avenue.
Yeah, there'll be no pot there, so forget it.
Yes, there are restrictions if this is implemented. Sorry, Mr. Collins.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. Anyone who's in favor of retail sales in Abington but is considering voting against this because they'd like to see it go anywhere, I urge you to consider that type of a vote, because if you vote against this, there is the chance then we get nothing down the road. So that if you want retail sales of marijuana in Abington, vote yes on this. And then if you want to tweak it so that it can be located in downtown Abington or in North Abington or along 123 or along 18, we can address that at a later time. But if you adopt this bylaw, we have that ground base that there will be retail marijuana sales in Abington. If you vote against it because of other reasons, I'm afraid that there could be a backfire down the road. So I would encourage anyone who supports retail to vote in favor of this.
Just to clarify one thing, there's no guarantee that if we set up a zoning bylaw that a retail company will actually come to Abington, but they could pursuant to our bylaw. It's not an automatic. Like any other business, we could, Andy Burbine.
Andrew Burbine, 30 Lantern Lane. Just, again, we passed the moratorium so we could get people all on the same page here. I think we want to turn this down at this point in time. Again, we're not, if this goes into effect now, we're not going to be receiving Mike DeMarco's 3% sales tax because there's nothing in place to receive that at this point in time. The Board of Health, I think, again, would probably like to put regulations in. We have a moratorium in place. I think we ought to put the moratorium in place. Let other people do what they need to do to get the 3% local option tax on the warrant for next year. Any regulations that the Board of Health wants to impose, get those things straightened out, and then next year, I guess we'd be ready to open up pot shops.
Thank you, Mr. Burbine. Yes, sir. Name and address.
Jeffrey Ludlam, 53 Charles Street. I'd just like to point out that by voting this in, a pot shop doesn't magically appear. There's still going to be a process, there's still going to be zoning, there's still going to be permitting. All those questions can be answered. Despite the fact that there won't be a moratorium, there will be a process in place to regulate this. So don't be scared that all of a sudden, because we actually put this into place and the moratorium goes away, that suddenly there's just going to be a random shop is going to open up with no regulations.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Charlene Simonetti, 69 Spruce Street. Isn't there a minimum of feet from a school that it has to be from?
She's asking about the minimum distance that it must be located away from a school.
It's only
500
feet? 500 feet, right?
500 feet.
So if this isn't passed, then it could be 500 feet from a school.
Do the state regs say 500? The state regs do say 500, so regardless if this passes or not, it would have to be 500 feet away from a school.
I know.
If this passes, it can only be in that zone.
Right, so think about that when you're voting, that it could be 500 feet from a school.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Roy Manning, 34 Orange Street. I attended Mr. Collins' presentation on the marijuana in the town, and I did have a question. I hear everyone's concerned about how we do not have the 3% sales tax for Abington specifically regulated. If this passes, can we still pass that again next year, or would this negate the option to do that?
If someone puts it on the warrant for the Springtown meeting of next year, the town would vote on whether to enact that tax, correct?
And then,
Yes, through you, Mr. Moderator. That's right. So this is zoning. The tax is separate. There's a provision of the general laws that has to be accepted at town meeting. That is completely independent of what you decide to do on the zoning side.
thank you.
Thank you. Anything else to be heard on Article 17? Yes, Mr. Hughes. Moving right along.
Hi, Bruce Hughes, 69 Randolph Street. If you could put that zoning map back up, because I just want to show folks where we located this thing. It's in an industrial corner of the town, and, you know, we heard the input that we got that we didn't want to have it near residential areas. So there's some residential around here, but it's not near any schools. It's in an industrial area. It's on the Weymouth town line. So, I mean, you address the concern, it won't be within 500 feet of schools and stuff like that. And so we put a lot of thought into where we would have this zoning district.
Thank you. Nothing else being heard on the matter. We'll move to the planning board's motion, which requires a 2/3 vote to adopt this zoning bylaw to create the marijuana overlay district. If the 2/3 vote does not pass, there will be no marijuana overlay district. Okay? All those in favor of approving the planning board's motion on Article 17, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. No. Moderator declares the 2/3 vote has passed. If anyone would like to challenge that, now's your time. Seeing none, the Article 17 has passed by in excess of 2/3. Articles 18 through 31 are some zoning amendments. I would ask that you please try to remain here at the meeting because we do need to tend to the town's business. Rick, if you want to say whatever you want.
I would just like to point out that any of these articles can be reconsidered before the end of the night, so I just want to point that out.
It's a procedural thing that could be brought up. I wanted to just say one thing before I pass the microphone to our deputy moderator. I wanted to congratulate the 2018 inductees of the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame, which were recently, they were notified last week. It hasn't hit the papers, but if you know these people, Freddie Kelleher from the class of 71, Don Leach from the class of 75, Heidi Maroth Waddle from the class of 87, Shannon Sweezy O'Donnell from the class of 87, and CJ Hillier from AHS class of 04 will all be inducted into the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame this coming October. Congratulations to those alumni. At this time, because as many of you know, I appear before the zoning board, and all of the remaining articles are amendments to the zoning bylaws. I'm going to step down and let Mr. Buckley, is it? Mr. Buckley, a former moderator. He'll handle the reins from here. Thank you, Mr. Buckley.
Very much. They are nowhere near as interesting as the subject matter we just finished. Article 18, to see if the town will amend the Abington zoning bylaw, section 175-26C, by striking out the words "or storage space" and add a new subsection D to read as follows. Chair recognizes the chairman of the planning board for a motion. Oh, he is? Great.
The planning board moves to approve this article as printed with the following amendment. In section D, subsection 3, add "or by extension from the building inspector," so that it shall read 150 days following issuance of a building permit, or by extension from the building inspector permitting such construction.
Any questions on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Unanimous vote. Article 19, to see if the town vote to amend the dimensional and density charter, section 175-29, to increase the minimum lot width and minimum continuous lot frontage in the highway commercial zone from 100 feet to 125 feet, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve the Article 19 as printed in the warrant.
Is there anything to be said on the motion by Mr. Smith? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Is unanimous vote. Article 20, to see if the town vote to amend section H of the use chart found in zoning bylaw, section 175-21, by inserting the word "registered" in two places shown as bolded underlined text, which is in H2 and H3, inserting in the word "registered." Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 20 as printed in the warrant.
Anything to be said on Article 20? If not, all those in favor of Article 20, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Is unanimous vote. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw, section 175-35, as follows, as printed in the warrant, and the chair recognizes the chairman of the planning board, Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 21 as printed in the warrant.
Any questions on Article 21? Yes, sir.
Rich Negrelli, 340 Diane Circle. Could you explain this amendment, please? Could you explain it? Because you're taking authority away from the zoning board, so.
Presently, in fact, I'll do it better than that. Article 21 is proposed by the planning board to make our zoning bylaws require site plan review process and public hearings more efficient, and to remove a redundancy which does not serve any purpose other than to require neighbors to attend repetitive hearings for the same subject matter, and to delay bank financing and the town's approval of commercial investment in Abington. Presently, our zoning bylaws require that any proposed plans for new subdivision roads, multifamily dwellings, commercial buildings, or industrial projects must submit a plan to the planning board for review and approval. During the planning board subdivision and site plan review hearings, the drainage system in one of the critical issues which must be designed by the applicant's professional engineer, and their work must be reviewed and approved by a second professional engineer hired by the planning board at the applicant's expense. The planning board can only approve the plan if the town's engineer confirms that proposed plan would not create any flooding or drainage issues. However, all homeowners and business owners are also subject to a requirement to obtain a special permit if you propose to do any construction work within Section 17535, local floodplain and wetlands protection overlay district, which is shown as a shaded area in our town. And the map hopefully is behind me. As you can see, much of the town's property falls within these shaded areas and is considered to be our local overlay district, which includes poor soils. Currently, if you are working on a 1 or 2 family home, you must first obtain a floodplain special permit from the zoning board. If you are a business owner or proposed on any project other than a 1 or 2 family home, you must file for a site plan review hearing with the planning board, and then must file for floodplain special permit hearings with the zoning board. To my knowledge, no site plan review is required. I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. No site plan is required. Plan review is required for 1 and 2 family homes from the planning board. This article will update the language of 17535 to avoid the need of 2 separate boards to hold separate hearings to approve the same engineering, approved drainage system, design plans for the same property. So think about it. I do not recall a time within the planning board's engineer has approved a site drainage system and the zoning board later rejected the special permit. On its face, the hearings are redundant. The current bylaw requires 2 sets of notices, 2 sets of public hearings, and votes for 2 separate boards for the same single plan. It is wasteful and inefficient. Let me please be clear, however, this article does not remove the need for a developer or existing Abington business to obtain the required special permit. If the drainage design is insufficient, neither the site plan nor the special permit would be approved. However, the approval of this article would allow the entire project to be reviewed with the landowner and the neighbors in 1 set of public hearings. A similar process is already in place for the issuance of a related special permit for lot coverage issues, and it works well. If you are proposed to exceed the limits of our zoning bylaw regarding how much of your lot can be covered by pavement and buildings, you must seek a special permit from the zoning board. If you own a 1 and 2 family, you must seek a special permit and site plan approval from the planning board for other types of buildings and uses. The approval of Article 21 will align floodplain special permit in the same exact way. This article is not a slight against our zoning board or a power grab for this type of hearing. Approval of this article will make our town's hearing process more efficient, does not cancel a developer's requirement to obtain the permit, and would allow neighbors to be able to attend a single set of hearings for larger projects to review all drainage and all the site details.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Smith or the motion before the floor? If not, all those in favor of Article 21, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, more than 2/3 having voted in the affirmative, Article 21 is adopted. Article 22, to see if the town will vote to amend zoning bylaw Article 2, Section 175-4, by adding a definition of building and by deleting the wording as shown in crossed out bold print. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 22 as printed in the warrant.
Is there anything to say on Article 22? If not, all those in favor of Article 22, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. It is unanimous vote. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to amend zoning bylaw Article 6, dimensional and density regulations 175-26, accessory uses and accessory buildings, by inserting the wording shown in bold print to the current definition. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 23 as permitted in the warrant.
Is there anything to be said on Article 23? Yes, sir.
Robert Pratt, 239 Walnut Street. Is our existing buildings grandfathered, or is this just for new construction?
Existing buildings will be grandfathered.
Thank you.
Any other questions on Article 23? If not, all those in favor of the adoption of Article 23, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Unanimous vote. Article 24. To see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw. Article 8, off-street parking and loading regulations, Section 175-47, entrance and exit points. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to pass over Article 24.
Is there anything that's said on Article 24? And the motion made by Mr. Smith to pass over Article 24. All those in favor of passing over Article 24, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 24 is passed over. Article 25, to see if the town will vote to amend zoning Article 2, definitions, Section 175-4, definitions and word usage by adding to the definitions of word usage swimming pool and including et cetera. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to pass over Article 25.
Is there anything to be said on Article 25? If not, all those in favor of passing over Article 25 will please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 25 is passed over. Article 26, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning map for the purpose of changing the boundaries of the watershed protection overlay district or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 26 as printed in the warrant.
Is there anything to be said on Article 26, filed by the Water Commissioners, approved by the Planning Board? All those in favor of Article 26 will please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Unanimous vote. Article 27, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw by deleting Article 9, signs, and replace it with the following, and further to authorize the town clerk to edit or revise any article or section numbering so that the revised and updated zoning bylaw is in proper numerical and sequential order, and all references to other sections are properly updated to reflect the amendments approved by the town meeting or take any other action relative thereto. We are incorporating a new sign bylaw. Mr. Smith.
The planning board supports the article with an amendment to allow internally illuminated freestanding signs, which will be made by the sign bylaw committee.
Chair recognizes Mr. Wing of the Sign Bylaw Committee for the amendment mentioned by Mr. Smith.
Mr. Moderator, we would like to amend the article, Section 175-58, Section A. At the end of the paragraph, we would add in internally illuminated road signs are permitted for business and commercial purposes. For a point of interest, Mr. Moderator, the town, over the years, our sign bylaw has been pieced together, and it was a mess. So we started this about almost 2 years ago, trying to go through it and fix it, and it was determined at that point that it couldn't be done. So we wiped it out completely and redesigned it. I don't know if any of you took the flyer up there, but basically the highlights are that it limits the number of signs a business can have. I'm sure some of you have seen the shops that you go by them and they're completely filled with signs. We prohibit the neon signs on the windows, restricts how much a store window can be taken up, prohibits unpermitted temporary signs. We prohibit temporary signs from fences and trees, moves the permitting process to the building inspector, and establishes a limited appeal process to the ZBA. It gives our zoning enforcement agent something to work with. And I hope you'll approve this article as it's written. I want to thank Bob Manning, Andy Burbine, John Shepard, and Mr. Collins for doing this. Freestanding? Okay. Mr. Moore, if I could change that to, amending that to internally illuminated freestanding signs are permitted for businesses and commercial purposes. Thank you.
Anything else to be said on Article 27, the sign bylaw? Yes, ma'am.
Deborah Dupe, 1430 Bedford Street. I live and work at 1430, and they're doing all the construction on 18. If a sign's been removed, is there going to be some kind of a grandfather clause that we can put bow flags up or something like that, just so that people know that we're still open?
Thank you very much.
If you have a legally sign at the moment, then it would be grandfathered in.
Okay, they cut the sign down, so that's why I'm curious of it.
If the sign's taken down?
They had actually taken the sign down to put the wall up in front of the building. So I'm wondering if there's something that that there's going to be some kind of grandfather in the clause or something like that.
Yeah, I think you'd have to
for
go.
the businesses along 18.
I think you'd have to go back before the building inspector.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey.
Jack Bailey, 645 Washington Street. My question would come under temporary signs, St. Patrick's Day banners put up around town. How would that affect the committee where I put one at Bailey's Garage, one at Dave Nisby's, and one at Bill's Barber, and one on Route 18 at the Najalis family home? Would I be required to get a permit for each and every one? Would I be subject to can I put it up the month of March, starting in the 1st and taking it down on the 18th? How does that affect the committee?
You would be able to have signs of that nature in town, and in certain instances, you'd have to go before the building inspector, but there'd be no cost to those, to you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the sign bylaw being proposed by the sign bylaw committee and approved by the planning board? If not, all those in favor of Article 27 will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. It is unanimous vote. Article 28, to see if the town will vote to amend Section 175-39I by deleting the crossed-out text and inserting the underlined bold text as shown on the screen. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 28 as printed in the warrant.
Is there anything to be said on Article 28? If not, all those in favor of Article 28 will signify by no.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr.
Robert
Manning.
34 Orange Street. This article is by petition, and it adjusts a decrease in the zoning area, and I was wondering if it was possible if we could defer this till after the master plan is done. As a petition article as opposed to a planning board article, I'd like to see this reviewed as part of the master plan and then the zoning bylaw changes before we make this amendment.
Mrs. Mays.
Terry Mays, 1020 Hancock Street. My question is, A and B, what does that mean to a homeowner? 250 feet to 50 feet to 25 feet to 10 feet, just from a homeowner's perspective.
I recognize Mr. Riley.
Sean Riley, 26 Russell Lane. I was one of the petitioners to draft this article. I drafted this article. This only affects the land in what we call the Muppet District, the Multiple Use Planned Development District, which is essentially located on the north side of Chestnut Street, west of Hancock Street to the Brockton City line. Most of it's woods. Currently, as currently written, this bylaw requires for developments in there to be at least the lots have to be 200 feet wide, and any building in there would have to be 200 feet away from either side lot line, which sometimes can make that difficult if your lot is 200 or 300 feet wide, and then you have to have the building 200 feet away from each lot line. It also requires parking lots currently to be 100 feet away from a street or lot line. The proposed amendments reduce the minimum setback requirements to more reasonable and workable 50-foot minimum setbacks, which would still provide an ample buffer area along the lot lines. And of course, there'd be a 50-foot buffer on the adjoining land if there was any development on that side. The land north of Chestnut Street is known to contain large ledge and wetlands area, which requires more flexibility for the building placement if the town wants to encourage limited commercial development in that area. It is not proposing, and it's not hurting the local homeowner. It's only for this district on Chestnut Street. There is another Muppet district in the northeastern part of town where coal tar is. Actually, it's where the air base is, and the air base's zoning trumps that. So this is really affecting north of Chestnut Street. So it has no effect on homeowners. It only affects future commercial development in that area of town.
Ms. Mays.
I just want to clarify that it's not all the woods off of Chestnut and Hancock, because I abut those woods.
Yes, you're on the south side. All right, where are you? It is, the Muppet District is north of Chestnut, west of Hancock. You're on Route 139, if I recall, unless you've moved.
Yes, that's
Okay.
it.
Are there any other questions on Article 28? If not, all those in favor of the passage of Article 28 as printed in the warrant will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, more than two-thirds having voted in the affirmative, the article is adopted. Article 29, to see if the town will vote to amend sections 175-47, 175-48, 175-50, 175-51 of the Abington zoning bylaw is shown below. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 29 as printed in the warrant.
Is there anything to be said on Article 29? If not, all those in favor, Mr. Manning.
Robert Manning, 34 Orange Street. Again, Mr. Chairman, as it was heard earlier today, this also has some direct effect on size and lots and everything else that's going on within the town. And I would again ask the moderator to amend this to be left till after the master plan is done and not voted on tonight.
Do you have a motion, Mr. Manning? Motion to pass over the affirmative article. The affirmative motion will be considered first, Mr. Riley.
Did he make a motion to? The motion on the table has already been made to approve the article. Again, I would urge you to approve this article. This specific section, especially section 47, is an older section that has been, it's very vague wording, has been a sort of a source of some problems. In fact, one of the early articles that we passed over addressed this, but it was passed over because the planning board preferred this wording because it was more detailed. Right now, there's a bylaw in there that says that your driveway can't be within 50 feet of your neighbor's driveway. And in some neighborhoods, that's not a problem. But if you're in the Musterfield and some of the smaller neighborhoods, almost every driveway violates that. Now, if you're pre-existing, that's fine. But if you were to put in a new driveway or expand it, that could be a problem. So this is an amendment and an update to more clarified language to, instead of just saying any driveway, commercial or residential, has to be 50 feet away from each other, it now has restrictions for residential driveways and then commercial and multifamily driveways. And it basically tries to address that, some of the issues that, for example, if your residential driveway can't be right up against the property line. You have to have at least 3 feet of grass there, and there would be 3 feet on the other side. It might be more, but that's your minimum. Also, for the first time, we're putting in language now that prevents someone from paving their entire front yard. We've seen that in some other towns in the Quincy area where they needed more parking, so they just started paving the front lawn area. Now there's restrictions that you can't do more than 40% unless you go get a permit and explain why. Without that bylaw, there's not much to stop a homeowner from doing that unless they violated lot coverage, which is a different section. Additionally, there's language that clarifies, right now it says, if it's not a 1 or 2 family use, if it's a commercial use or a municipal use, any parking lots proposed must be paved, or you have to get a variance. Now there's language in there that says the planning board can grant a waiver to that and allow a gravel parking lot, for example, Griffin's Dairy parking lot. It's a gravel parking lot, we'll just leave it at that. Whether that conforms to the current bylaw, so I don't know. Now, the planning board would have the ability for a landscaping group or a Plymouth Street Park or whatever, they can allow gravel parking lots in designated area if a majority of the vote approves that. That language is not in the bylaw now. There's others here that require more buffers. If you're going to park, if you're in a commercial area and you're going to park large trucks in the front yard, then you have to screen it. It just clarifies the language to improve aesthetics and streetscape in the town. I hope you approve this. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Burbine.
Andrew Burbine, 30 Lantern Lane. I just want to echo what Mr. Manning said. I think we're going to do a comprehensive plan, a comprehensive review of the zoning bylaws to wait on, especially petition articles. These aren't articles that were proposed by the planning board. These are articles that are proposed by petition, which are a little odd in itself. But I think we ought to wait on these, ask whoever is going to be doing the comprehensive review to look at this sort of thing and do it that way, as opposed to doing piecemeal zoning, which is what we're doing and we have been doing actually in the last 3 or 4 years.
Mr. Riley.
I fully support a review of the zoning bylaws, and I hope we will do that when the master plan is done. The issue I have is without updating these bylaws now, we don't have the controls that I just mentioned to you. I think that putting these controls in now is good, and if when we do the zoning review, it further fine-tunes that or keeps them as is, that's great. I would also notice that even though this is a petition article, it goes through the same vetting process. Copies of this bylaw were submitted to the zoning board and to the planning board at the end of January. The zoning board decided to really have no input in it because they're the ones that adjudicate this. The planning board, however, did have input in this, and they had their public hearing along with all the other zoning articles. It was vetted, and it has been endorsed and approved by the planning board. So again, I ask that you approve Article 29. Thank you.
Is there anything else to be said on Article 29? If not, your vote will come on the positive motion to approve Article 29. All those in favor of Article 29, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 of the votes having been cast in the affirmative, Article 29 is adopted. Article 30. To see if the town will vote to amend the table of use regulations, section 175-21 of the Abington zoning bylaw by revising portions of the column entitled MUPDD, multiple use plan development district, shown on the table below, or take any other action relevant thereto. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to pass over Article 30.
Anything to be said on Article 30? If not, all those in favor of passing over Article 30 will please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Article 30 is passed over. Article 31, to see if and last article, to see if the town will vote to amend the Abington zoning bylaws and Abington zoning map by deleting all references to the technology business zoning district and replace it with a new business development zoning district. Mr. Smith.
The planning board moves to approve Article 31 as printed in the warrant.
Anything you said on Article 31, Mr. Manning?
Robert Manning, 34 Orange Street. Once again, I'm just going to say it one last time. This is a huge change to a bunch of different zoning, and all the planning board has approved it. It's a maximum change, and since we're not looking at our zoning bylaws, I'd like to pass over this and wait till we go through our master plan before we make these changes.
Ms. Manning.
Rory Manning, 34 Orange Street. I have a question. If we're changing the verbiage of what this district is called, does that affect the marijuana vote we just made? Because we voted to put in a specific district, now we're changing the name of it.
No.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Rich Negrelli, 340 Diane Circle. Just want to look at one thing. Windmills are in here. Are we going to have wind power up there?
You know, windmills, if it's in there, it's in there. I mean, I
think that's
exactly what
that's a little much for the town, for that area.
Exactly where it is, and I'll look it up for you.
Well, it's right there.
I know it
says yes on windmills.
I'm going to find it. I'll take my time finding it.
I-7.
Last page, Wayne.
Yes, windmills permitted, provided that the minimum distance of the windmill from existing structures is 1 3/4 times the height of the proposed windmill.
Well, I just want the town to know that possibly windmills could go up there.
Mr. Bezanson.
Alex Bezanson, 761 Randolph Street. I urge you to pass this. That land has sat vacant for nearly 20 years. Google's not coming to Abington. Amazon's not coming. They're not going to Southfield. They're not coming here. This changes it to business development. We need business development in this town. If we wait for the master plan and then wait to redo the zoning bylaws and then wait for permitting, we're 6, 8, maybe 10 years away from having business up in that area. We've waited long enough to get the tax revenue from a business up there. I think we change it to business development and attract business to the town. Thank you.
Mr. Collins.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. The vote of the planning board was 4-1. I was the one opposed for a couple different reasons. One being As stated earlier, there are proposing 24 changes in use for that land. Just to clarify what it is, not all businesses are allowed in every zoning district. There are some businesses, depending on the type, where they have to get extra permitting, extra conditions, they have to meet extra thresholds in order to be allowed in certain areas. And what this is going to do is give 24 different types of businesses, make it easier for them to go and open up without any sort of public hearing. So my concern is that perhaps all of these are appropriate, but considering we're going to be undertaking a major rewrite of our zoning bylaws, we're going to be doing a master plan, I really am not comfortable making 24 significant changes to our uses at this time.
Anything, Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll read from my, this is not a substantial change as was mentioned earlier. From the biggest change is the name of the district, from technology business to business development. This article seeks to attract more new business tax dollars and encourage new businesses to invest in the northern ends of Route 18 and Route 58 in Abington. The amendment will replace the existing technology business zoning district with an updated business development zoning district. The name change alone is intended to broaden the spectrum of desired businesses in this area of town while still carrying forward many of the same provisions that were written into the technology business district regulations. For example, residential uses and transfer stations for trash were prohibited in the TB district and will continue to be prohibited in the business development district. Recreational facilities, retail stores, and restaurants, which previously required to obtain a special permit under the technology business regulations, will now be allowed to move into the business development district. And respectfully, I would disagree with the prior speaker. Any commercial business that comes in to build a business in Abington has to go through a site plan public hearing with the planning board. This is a question of whether they also have to go to a zoning hearing for permission to come into Abington. This would allow a restaurant, and we want restaurants to go into this part of town. We'd like a recreational center to go into this part of town. Others have been changed from, no, you're not allowed to, you must get a special permit. So we tried to look at some of the businesses we'd like to go into that part of town to make it more business friendly. I hope you will approve this, because we are now, the business owners and the property owners in that part of town are competing with those in Union Point who are trying to attract commercial development. And with the expansion of Route 18, businesses may be looking for the finished product, who wants to move into Abington. We'd like to try to welcome good businesses to come to Abington in this specific area north of town. Thank you.
Anything else to be said on Article 31? If not, your vote will come upon the motion by the planning board to approve Article 31. All those in favor of approving Article 31 will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The opinion of the chair, more than 2/3 having voted in favor of Article 31 is adopted. Mr. Riley moves the town meeting now stand adjourned. It's been a pleasure working with you.
If I could just ask if you would please drive slowly when you're leaving the school area tonight, please drive slowly. And please make sure you take all of your materials with you and deposit in the recycling bins. There's recycling at the exit door.